I'm calling to order the SAU55 Withdrawal Planning Committee at 7:01 on May 7th. Mrs. Belcher, could you take the roll?
Sabrina Alberg.
Here.
Kim Farah.
Here.
John Hughes.
Here.
Barbara Kiska.
Here.
Earl Metzler.
Here.
Mark Sherwood.
Here.
Jennifer Silva. And Karen Steele.
Here. All right, let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. John, you want to lead us?
Sure. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. As we said at the last meeting, there'll be time for comments from the public. I will also allow time for comments from the public at the end of the meeting, if the meeting has not gone on too long. Are there any comments from the public? Okay, there being none, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. Those should be in your packets.
I motion that we approve the minutes of May 1st.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion relative to the minutes? All those in favor of approval of the minutes? 5. Against? Abstain? 1. 501. Okay. Moving on. The next item on the agenda is a discussion of the current SAU budget and the pro forma budget that was posted. And I'll ask Mr. Dowd to come to the table so he can start that discussion. And just 1 second before you start, because I know there was a question on the breakdown of some of the lines. And I think that's in a different place in the packet.
Yeah, a couple back, and I had stapled the breakdown as well as the SAU budget together. So it's, I think it's just before the contractual obligations page maybe, or thereabouts. Yeah, that's it, Kim. You have it in a
Okay.
minute. So it was after.
I just think people are going to want to have that at the same time that we're talking about this. So this one is the pro forma budget. It's a single sheet, two-sided. This is the budget that has questions in terms of line breakdowns on major lines that are within the budget. In the back here. There's my copy for the rest of us. Okay. And moving forward, we will try to have the agenda. For those that aren't familiar with how the school board runs, we're trying to run this the same way, and that we'll be putting together, or Mrs. Belcher will be putting together an agenda packet. So everybody has sent me documents. I sent them to her, and she'll put them forward. If you send them as Excel or a Word document, it's easier for her if she has to make changes. Typically, they're uploaded to the public website as a PDF file. And so the agenda pack will be put together. We don't have a secure site, so probably what we'll do, if it's together in advance of the meeting, we will send it out to the board members. And then we just ask that you don't publicly distribute it until after the board has had a chance to meet, or the committee, whenever this committee has a chance to meet and discuss it. So that way we don't have documents going out that have no explanation with them, if everybody's okay with that. And thanks to Mrs. Belcher for getting this together on such short notice. Yep.
And is there any chance we can show this on the documents we're reviewing right now on the screen?
I don't know how easy that is to do. Well,
You would have to have someone running it all the time who knew what you were talking about, because there are so many documents
Right.
on
Sure.
it. I'm not sure.
well, I think as we move forward, if we do move forward, that some, I agree, it might be good to have more of a PowerPoint on some of this, but I don't know if it's feasible right now to
It's just hard for people to follow along if they can't see what we're seeing.
I know.
I believe everything is available right now online.
No, no.
Oh, the agenda packet isn't.
The agenda
avail-
packet's
okay.
not going to be available until after we've had discussion. But the public will have the opportunity to come back at a subsequent meeting if there are questions regarding documents, so. I understand your concern, but it's from a technical point, from a logistics point of view, I think it's just kind of difficult to, because you'll find that we're going to start sorting through documents as we're sitting here. So if there are times when it makes sense, I think we'll try to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jeff?
Well, good evening, committee members. It's so nice to see a bunch of fresh faces, not that I'm not seeing our school board and budget committee. I will do a quick run through. So, thank you, Kimber. You covered the budget itself, which looks a lot like that, which is the current year, well, I shouldn't say the current year proposed budget or approved budget for the 1920 fiscal year for SAU, and you have the document, which is the pro forma. We also have some supporting schedules, which look a lot like this in nature. And so we have some that support shared services and vendor contractual obligations. And then you have a few which are captioned budget classification detail with various breakdown of accounts I think you would ask for as well. Hopefully you have those in your packets.
Right, and those are at the back of this SAU budget.
Perfect. I didn't know where they were in your packet, so I wanted to give some context.
That's why I wanted
Ones
to
are
pull it
not,
out.
right, so the shared ones are not. What's on this budget here is just the explanation about the board had requested, or the committee had requested, more detail if the SAU budget had it. And there wasn't a more detailed one, so Mr. Dowd put together some pages to help explain some of the ones that needed to be broken down by detail. So that's what you'll find there. The other ones that he's speaking about are further in your packet, and these are the ones that he talked about as shared. They look like this.
And then lastly, we have two documents which I think are rather colorful, probably in landscape paper, legal size paper landscape, and those are relating to contractual obligations for salaries. So I just wanted to run through that, so as we go through the documents, because there appear to be a lot, we at least know what the perspective is on them. So I did want to share, and my goal, I can cover the pro forma, I can cover whichever budget you'd like first. I did want to put out there, though, the context of the pro forma budget. And I know that there's been some suggestion that it's been premature, that there is something, that something that could have waited and that sort of thing. Look, it's going to be up to this withdrawal committee to decide what that picture looks like. It's not up to me. And the context that I set this up in is to say, hey, look, if this were to happen in the next fiscal year, based on what we know now, without making a whole lot of assumptions, what are those things that should be part of that budget discussion? And we talk about budget discussion, we talk about two sides. John's on budget committee, so he knows. I think Kim does too, very, very well. We have the one side, which are the expenditures, and then the other side, that's the revenue. So when we talk about the like anything going forward, the pro forma or whatever, I'd like to stay focused on taxpayer impact. And if something is either a reduction or an addition in expense, or a reduction or an increase in revenue, it should be viewed as such, because those are the two factors that really have tax impact. And early, premature or not, the pro forma budget that you have in front of you, I think, gives some perspective. And I can assure you, I don't think anyone at this table is going to agree with every number that I have in here. And that's fine. I think the important thing is to consider that it is a place to start. And it is something to look at. And it does require assumptions on my part, which I just make just to get it out there for discussion. The fact that this is the second meeting you're having, and we're able to have a discussion on what that would look like to gain a better understanding as to actually what makes up these numbers, it's exceptionally encouraging. So I think that's the purpose, that's the spirit in which that pro forma budget was put out there. I have no idea what these are going to look like. That's up to you. But to understand the mechanics, I'd be very happy to have that out there.
Okay, so conversely, you've put a pro forma budget together for our district, but I don't have the converse for Hampstead. So you're putting budgets together, but you're only putting one side of what this looks like. So you're telling us but I don't see the mirror as to the other budget. Why is that?
It was the Timberland Committee.
So there's no mirror budget to show where the reduction is going to be. There's huge increases here in our pro forma budget, but nothing. So I'm just going to leave that now. I think the easiest way to go through this, the quickest way, is to pull down, let's go through this line by line and just make for instance, line number 1, 2317 is the audit. Should Timberlane withdraw from the district and the SAU and become a sole, one district SAU, those business operations, from what I'm seeing from other SAUs, would fall under the district as opposed to an SAU. So that would be a potential cost savings of 77% of that budgeted line. That would be my guess.
Well, the budget that you have for 1920 is simply what I would recognize as the Timberlane portion. And this,
So,
Kim, I can't believe you hit on this, the very first line, audit. If you broke apart, there would be a requirement to have a separate SAU for Timberlane, and that's a good question. Would we need an audit, or would you need an audit for the SAU that Timberlane would be part of, or would you just need it for the district? Great question, that's why we're here.
Well, the question is yours, I think, to answer. Would we?
Yeah.
As a single district, I guess that's an action item then. As a single district SAU, are we going to require a standalone audit?
My impression would be yes. I can confirm that for you if you'd like, as an action item.
Okay, I'm not really sure why we would, if, per RSA, we are required to have a superintendent for an SAU, but I don't think there's any requirement outside of the superintendent for an SAU. So I don't understand why we would have a separate audit if all our business function was within the district.
Salem is a single school district and SAU, and I don't see,
You don't see a separate SAU audit?
there's not an audit for the SAU, no.
Okay. So that's a question mark. That's a
And I
potential
do think you would
savings.
be a separate SAU. It's just a question of whether it'd be an audit or not. I include this on here, and we've just had a very good discussion on that line.
Now, and this $8,000 on the budget is the total cost of the audit, not Timberlane's portion.
That's what I would estimate. It'd be a smaller scale audit.
Well, no, but this number right here is the current SAU audit number,
Yes,
of which we pay 77%.
yes.
I'm sorry, just a point of clarification. I thought, I just made a note because I thought I heard you say that this 2019-2020 column represented Timberlane portion only. Did I?
Let me put it this way. It wouldn't be Timberlane's portion only. It would be some assumptions based on a single district SAU with Timberlane being its only district.
Timberlane only.
Timberlane only.
So if Timberlane right now is doing a Timberlane only audit and Timberlane became a Timberlane only SAU, wouldn't it be the same exact audit?
It may be, it may not be. I can check and see if how other districts are handling, because the SAU is a legal entity, and you would be required to have, or become part of another SAU. And by way of example, I don't want to get there yet, but you're a pretty big pool for, let's say, health insurance. And if you are your own SAU, then you can be your own pool. But if you're not your own SAU, you would have to be part of someone else's pool. These are just the nuances and of why there would have to be another SAU.
Okay, so I think we've talked about that line a lot. Now, somebody is probably going to need to take an action item to determine whether or not what the cost is. And Karen's kind of alluded to the fact that is to pull somebody else's single district SAU and see what sort of audit expense they have outside of their district. I mean, Salem and Wyndham right now are single district SAUs, I think, and it should be easy enough for somebody to take that and see how much if they just have the single audit or if there's another one.
You want Salem and Wyndham?
I just threw that out
areas.
there because I think they're
Okay.
both single district SAUs, and it should be an easy number to find.
It'd be nice if they can be as comparable employee-wise, and if you can get them as close.
I mean,
As well.
Londonderry is another good example.
Yeah.
Londonderry single district.
Hudson and Pelham are both single district too.
I can do that.
Okay, great. So,
I think the factor would be whether there would be an audit for each entity and one expense rolled up into the district, which would make sense. Whatever they audited is, even if it's a short, small audit, or is the SAU audited separately, so. And John, I think you raised a good point, and if you don't mind, I'm going to sidetrack here for a second. We are just, if it's useful for comparative purposes, to give some perspective on the district. And my goal here is to make sure that whatever the costs are, whatever the financial aspect of this withdrawal committee's work is that it reflect and adequately reflect and accurately reflect what those figures are going to be for the warrant. So if it's helpful for comparative purposes, we are a district of over 700 staff. We onboard dozens of staff every year, have handled separations and retirement on as many or more. This district alone, from a business office perspective, handled over 4,000 requisitions, as many purchase orders requiring in excess of 8,000 approvals between the building or the budget owner and my office. Handled over 11,000 vendor invoices or invoice credits totaling over $17.5 million. We handled 11 federal grants, including commodities, which in the 17-18 year was about $1.6 million. Our check volume was for over 6,100 check payments, just shy of $38 million. We had over 28,000 payroll entries for positions, substitutes, certifications, stipends, general stipends, and the like processed for over $22.5 million. And we had over 16,500 direct deposit items processed, totaling over $22.5 million. So that in terms of what comparability, scale, size would be, I hope these factors are useful to that end.
Okay, so one of the things you mentioned was federal grants. How many federal grants do we have that we manage?
In any given year, in 2017-18, it was 11.
And how many does Hampstead have?
5, maybe,
Okay.
in that neighborhood. 11's not the SAU, 11's Timberlane only.
Right, so Timberlane has 11, Hampstead has 5.
Right.
I just asked a question because I'm looking at the current 77-23 split.
Yeah.
So we have 11 versus 5, which I haven't computed, but doesn't look like it's 77-23. Okay. Are they all of equal difficulty or equal level of management?
Sorry.
I don't know what the word is I'm looking for.
Involvement?
Involvement, yes.
Right.
Same type of grant, essentially.
They are, I won't say they are, but it depends on the grant type and the follow-up that needs to occur as a result of that. It is a process, when I say handled over, a certain number of grants that doesn't really describe what the work is that goes into it, but it's, I don't think that there's a grant or two that came in that would be different parity-wise from one district to the other. Commodities, for example, if we consider that a grant, it's part of a grant program, right? It's listed in our single audit. Doesn't require a lot of heavy lifting on the end of the business office, aside from monitoring what comes in from our through our food service program and managing that. Other grants are much more involved and require time to annually get updates on them. We have a lot of compliance issues that are coming up now. Time and effort reporting is a bigger priority now. So for every time, well, I won't bore you with that, but time and effort reporting is a bigger endeavor at this point, and that really varies from grant to grant. So, but that's the scope of them. We also have a number of opportunities at the state level, which we've received for infrastructure funding, and Timberlane has been the beneficiary, as has Hampstead, on various programs. It's difficult to say what the breakdown. I don't have the breakdown on what that is, but one grant might be one program for 10 times the money of 2 or 3 different programs. It just depends on how the grant is set up. But that's another perspective. It's not federal, that's state.
Okay.
The infrastructure grants
Okay.
in particular.
Okay. So let's move on to line 2319, school board expense. Is that the expense of the SAU board?
Yes.
Okay, so we would assume that's the SAU board expense. Conference and travel expenses, those are for SAU employees, predominantly the superintendent and assistant superintendent, probably the business, the upper level
Correct.
administrators, correct?
But that can be for anyone who may participate in that, and whether
Within the
it's-
SAU,
Sorry?
within the SAU.
Within the SAU, and whether it's a superintendent or a business administrator or assistant superintendent, I have to assume that those roles and those travel expenses would port over to a single district SAU as well.
Okay.
Or directly to the district itself if they were to be picked up in that manner.
Course reimbursement, that is for graduate or continuing education for, I'm just saying this out loud too, because I know some people aren't familiar with this budget. The next line, and this one is one that where you were asked for breakdown, is on technology services. For those that aren't watching, It's about $115,000 line out of a $2 million budget. So can you speak to a little bit, or is this broken down in one of these other documents?
Well, I'll ask you, is this a good place to take a little offshoot and break out one of the additional schedules? Because we do have an additional schedule on that.
Well, yeah, what I'm trying to do is go down line by line. So if there's a breakout on this particular line, let's discuss that now before we move on to the next line.
So that's going to be featured in the budgetary classification detail schedule for technology. So it says budgetary classification detail
Okay, so
dash.
that's the last page of this document. And it says infinite vigilance estimate, is that frontline ESOP, is that the table we're
Correct.
looking at? So
Correct.
this is the breakout of the $115,000 line?
Well, it's not exactly, and let me, these almost came in two separate requests. So we're looking at a pro forma budget. What I've given detail on would be to support the current budget, so the 1920 budget.
I just want to look at the current budget, unless somebody else disagrees with me.
Well, and the current budget is 151, not 115.
Oh, it's 151.
Yeah, for 2019 and 2020.
Okay, so.
So what I'd like to do is go through maybe this schedule, and
I guess we need to.
yeah, that'll be informative as to what's in the actual budget, right, in the 1920 budget, and then that can be informative as to what would be needed in a single district SAU budget.
Okay, so you're saying 114 in the single district as the pro forma budget?
Correct.
Okay. So this document then relates to the $115,000 line?
This relates to the $151,000 line.
Okay, see, this is where I'm
It's in
getting,
the current budget packet, so it's
oh, I
related to
see.
current budget.
Okay, got it.
But
Okay.
for discussion purposes, if it would be helpful to go through what is in here to gain an understanding of that, it might be.
Well, I thought that's what we're trying to do. I guess I should have worked on maybe I should be working off this budget, not the pro forma budget.
I think if we understand the current budget, and then we look at the pro forma after to understand.
Yeah,
what
sorry,
the
that was
changes
my
are.
fault, so
To me, yeah, as long as you understand that, then I think you're right.
I get it now.
So
Okay.
if we look at what comprises the budget as it stands right now, you can see our enterprise system, Infinite Visions, at just shy of 86,000. And that covers human resources, HR, and a bunch of different other modules, fixed assets, general ledger, payroll, accounts payable.
So is that all software, the first four items?
Yes. Yes, they are software or software subscriptions. So Infinite Visions is our enterprise system. I don't want to jump back and forth, but I will here. I do think that there would be a cost reduction in that to a single district. I don't know exactly what that's going to be. So I took 20% off. We don't have a good number from them yet. I don't know that that's going to be the full 85,000, it might be 60,000. I don't know. I will have that number for you, though. We're working with them now to get that.
Are those per seat licenses?
Sorry?
Are those paid for per seat, or what is the basis for the license?
So the licenses are based on modules and based on being supported there. It's a cloud application, so they're supported in the cloud. And so that's a component of it. And then we have a per user license, and this is where it gets a little bit confusing. We have users that I'll call core users, who are part of the HR team, finance team, various pockets within higher level administration. Infinite Visions is available to all of our budget owners in a portal capacity, and in that portal capacity, those users are not charged, they're part of the overall package. So I may have a building admin who can, let's say, enter a requisition based on the budget that's been approved, who will enter that in the portal, and I'll call it the portal, in that workflow. And then that workflow would then go to the building principal, the budget owner, for approval. That budget owner is in that system as a portal user. There's no charge for that. Then it comes up to finance level, and then it's all of us with greater capabilities are charged on a per user basis. So it's a bit of a mix of charges between the number of modules and the users, but they're users who are charged or core users only. Frontline AppleTrack, that is our application, job applicant and substitute applicant system, which I think we've expanded the use of a little bit, possibly to include volunteers as well. I think they're going through that system now as well.
Yep.
So that is that system. Frontline ASOP, that is a system, that is our substitute notification system. So that system will, in an automated way, reach out to our substitute staff in the event that there's a need at one of our buildings. Time Clock Plus is our timekeeping system that is remotely hosted as well. And I think, Barbara, to your, that is on a per user basis.
Okay.
So that's a much more clear delineation. In formulating the number for the pro forma, I don't know exactly what these are going to look like. I presume that, for example, Time Clock Plus will be less.
Can I ask you a question?
Certainly.
So this is a good breakdown of the 151, but if we go back 4 years, we were only at 61,000 for our technology services. We've gone from 61,000 up to 82, up to 106, up to 125, and now up to 151. Can you help us understand where those increases are coming from?
Sure. So one of the increases, if you go down to the 239452, which is the contracted services, you'll see that we've moved a component which we would use for technology support up into technology services. So you see that went from 106 to 106 to 125 budgeted, 151 budgeted. Excuse me, we've increased our technology costs to some extent have increased. I think the goal here as well is to make sure that anything that's being paid for or had been paid for by Timberlane is recognized at the SAU level so that reimbursement, that Timberlane can be made whole on that. We have had our Time Clock Plus system, and I don't know what, it is what it is, and I believe if anyone's familiar with the term software as a service. So, Mark, yeah. So our costs there went from about $3,400 a year until we became unsupported when we hosted that locally to a much higher rate at $29,000 to be, and they handle all the hosting and that sort of thing. So between the three districts, you're looking at, well over 1,000 staff and even more when you consider substitutes and that sort of thing.
So would you expect that the technology services would stay on the same trajectory and keep increasing that much, or is it because the contracted services went down? Would it stay, if we did not withdraw, would you expect that the following year it would be about 150?
I will say this, I never would have expected that time clock, timekeeping service would go from, let's say, 3,000. In fairness, it was 3,000 unsupported. It probably would have been 3,000 on a more level trajectory going up to the 29,000. Now we were completely unsupported. I would expect generally that it probably would stay on a lower and more favorable trajectory. I don't think it would go up as much in the future. I think when you look at what we have here, Infinite Visions itself, that was something that up until the day I took over in the position was hosted locally. And we very, very quickly adopted a cloud model on that. What we ended up doing was also eliminating some of our server demands and ongoing server expenses to maintain that. So as we move to this different model, costs have gone up. It's a safer, better, and more secure option, which you can't argue with. It's just the way that field is going. SaaS is the way to go, yeah, I guess, from
Okay, so
sales
when we
perspective.
look at the contracted services and the technology services line, from the current budgeted to your pro forma, there's a difference of about, let's write it down somewhere, about 40 or 50,000. Where's that reduction coming from should we withdraw?
Well, the way that I reasonably looked at this and said, gee, with Time Clock Plus at 30,000 right now, if we were to take away some capacity there, maybe we could take off 10,000. I think that'd be a reasonable estimate. I don't have an exact number as to what that would look like. Reasonable estimate, I think, would be in that neighborhood. Infinite Visions, I took off the balance largely from Infinite Visions. I don't know that we're going to see huge cost savings from Frontline, from Apple Track. Hardware allocation essentially goes away because there would be that hardware, that's a loss of revenue on the other end, and we'll get into that at some point. Edulog itself, 4,917. It is what it is. There might be about $1,000 difference or so. So my idea here is to look and say, what could this rationally be? But I really have no idea. Is it possible that Infinite Visions, is going to turn around and say, well, you're essentially going to have the same number of users, core users, or maybe a few less, you're going to have the same number of modules. It doesn't matter to us if you have one, one entity, or if you, because we do is we're purchasing a number of databases and a number of database space, an amount of space on databases. And so they may say, the difference is not terribly material. It could be a third the cost. It could be the same cost. So I had to go somewhere in between. That's what I did, a reasonable estimate. What it's doing is it's getting a discussion for your committee, which I'm very happy with. And as I'm able to explore and get a better idea as to what that's going to look like, I think we'll have a good idea as to the perspective under which we were able to obtain that.
Do we use Edulog for the Hampstead kids who go to Pinkerton?
Yes.
Yes.
So we do coordinate the transportation of the Hampstead kids to Pinkerton? Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I think we've talked about that. It seems a reasonable estimate, and I understand where I'm just trying to look at the differentials. Legal services, it looks like the pro forma drops by half. I guess that's fair.
If I can jump back to that schedule, we have Edulog, you'll see the iTouch biometrics. In some cases, you'll see that there's a zero item line item here. And so this is a year that we've already had our maintenance paid for. So as we project out, and this is a year that it's covered, there may be an expense there in the future. I like to put that out there just so the committee knows. Legal fees, or legal services.
So you're estimating it drops by half, and I know Karen spoke to this last time about the large increase that we've seen in legal fees for the SAU over the last 3 to 5 years.
Correct.
And I think did you have a document that showed that?
Yeah, it didn't print out very nicely. I've got my own copy. It's just showing the history of all the budget data.
I mean, because as we're going through here, what I'm trying to get is where are the savings and where are the potential costs should we withdraw. So we see some savings in the legal line.
Could we get that document just resent in the Excel form?
Yeah. So real quickly, just so you see the orange is not validated. It's not at budget. I got some information in the agenda packet. Thank you. But I do have some questions on the numbers. But absolutely, I'm continually updating it and improving its quality.
It's in the agenda packet. It just, like you said, it
Yeah.
didn't format well in PDF. So.
And because it is not it's not all the data is valid, I'd prefer if we not put this particular document up on the public site. Is that okay? Or
Is that this one?
That's a part.
if it's got orange on it, probably.
Yeah.
Orange, purple, yellow.
I am known for doing my colors in my
here's
spreadsheets.
the orange.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a different one. It's a different one, because hers is in the landscape. But she printed
I
it out.
printed my own out so that I could see all the columns at once.
All right, so,
Yeah.
okay,
Oh,
so,
are you talking about this one that you did? The big, large one? Oh, no.
I see.
No, it's the one that has all of the budget summaries from
back page has
2009 all the way to including the pro forma.
I just don't
And
want
then
to post
just
it if you're
a
asking
quick
not to post it.
estimate of the purple column is the first draft. Yeah, that's the one that Sabrina
Yeah,
has.
it's that one.
Orange
It's
is
that
not
one.
One that was a
validated.
PDF that I put in.
Orange is budgeted, not actual.
She doesn't want that out yet.
Yeah, there's the legend is
Gonna
at the
hold
very
this one?
bottom. It's a work in progress.
Yeah, sorry.
It's good to identify it that way because I'm pretty sure the business office is not allowed to use that many colors. There must be some Gatsby prohibition against it. I think we have green and gray. Ooh, that's how we'd be able to tell yours.
So maintenance of equipment, looks like it stays the same. I don't think that's unreasonable. Office rental. So for those on the committee currently, it's kind of an odd thing, but there's a lease agreement and Timberlane essentially pays itself back for that portion of the lease agreement. So you're seeing, I'm a little confused as to why, never mind, that makes sense. In the pro forma budget, so to say that we're gonna lose $42,000 in revenue from the SAU is not really,
On the second page, you are
On the
absolutely
second
correct. But the
page.
first page is also.
on the first page,
The first page is correct. That
the
goes from
first page
42
is
to
correct, so
0.
we'll talk about that later.
Yeah,
'cause
the
that
loss
second
of
page is-
revenue is not accurate.
Yes, the loss of revenue is not accurate. Okay, so contracted services, and I think there was a question about this, wasn't there? Oh, no, we just went through that.
Yeah,
Never
the
mind, we know what
contracted
that is.
services was going down anyway.
Right, well,
If-
those
yep,
two
and that was
lines
how
kind
he
of got
explained it. Yep.
subsumed together, okay.
Yep.
Liability insurance, that, that shows that it stays the same, which I think is a reasonable assumption.
I actually have another sheet on contracted services, I believe, before we get to.
And
Was there another sheet in that packet?
There is, budgetary
Yeah.
classification detail, classification, contracted services, and the reason I'm pointing this out, that's one that I don't know what would, not sure exactly how that would be handled. If you see on that spreadsheet, so again, benefit strategies is on that sheet at 0. We've had years where there's been an expense from benefit strategies. They handle, well, that's under shared services. We'll talk to that a little later on. Recruiting, so this is speaking to the current year's budget, not to the pro forma. Recruiting, online advertising, $33.71. It's mostly for positions. SurveyMonkey, $325. This is the one that's of some interest. District Courier of $17,000. I've removed it from contracted services line to some degree, and I've also reflected it here on the other page as a loss of revenue.
Can you explain what that is?
I figured that you'd want to know.
I was going to ask it too.
We're talking about it. So we have a courier who handles all of our district interoffice, if you will, mail correspondence on a daily basis, and goes to every school. Starts with the SAU, makes his rounds, including Hampstead, and ends his day back here at the SAU. So that is something that we that is paid for through Timberlane. It's reimbursed by SAU. That makes sense? So it's someone who's on, I'll say Timberlane payroll. I don't want to think of payroll in the traditional sense, and his expenses are reimbursed through Timberlane. We in turn, SAU in turn, reimburses Timberlane for that expense. So this is exactly the situation that, well, from a technical perspective, I guess that line, that contracted services would go down because you're already paying for that courier. Now you're losing.
We're losing revenue.
Same thing with the rental.
Losing the offset.
Similar concept.
It's not, this is one that, the rental's a little bit different though, because the rental doesn't have any underlying cost going out. So the rental the SAU pays, well, Timberlane pays the SAU and it's part of the SAU assessment that gets paid back to Timberlane, but Timberlane doesn't have an out-of-pocket expense. In this case, there is an out-of-pocket expense for the courier from Timberlane, so you'd continue to pay him. It wouldn't really be an expense here. It's just that now you'd lose the offset to that expense.
What kind of things are curried? I mean, what are brought from school to school
No idea.
that can't be done electronically? Is it like
Well, yeah,
confidential data? Is it, I mean,
you have to remember that we are, which is just ironic, 'cause it's so much easier to send things electronically, but in some cases, our paperwork flow does require paperwork, and particularly with respect to sensitive documents, student information, maybe an accident report that, we have student data on student information. Kathy, you may be in a better position over the years to be able to articulate what types of things go through interoffice.
Well, so even some of the larger files, we wouldn't be able to upload those. They would be so large, we're not sure, we never know. We never know the size of the file as to whether or not it can be received. We can probably say that it's the receiving piece of it.
So if
There's
the
a
file
lot-
is too
yeah.
large, how would we get it from point A to point B?
Well-
Utilizing the courier.
If we, say that again?
I guess I'm missing the technology gap here.
Right.
That if you were sending information, what information files would be so large that you could not utilize the technology assistance we have and
Sure.
and require a
An
courier?
Alt-4 plan, a teacher who is on a plan for certification, and the cataloging of that, the superintendent signs off on those. He has to ensure that there's a staff member who's in the classroom who is on plan to be certified. They're in the process of that, and sometimes those binders are this big. And so it's a matter of, it could be anything, so, I mean, that's just one example.
No, that makes sense. That's the picture that I want to paint.
Thank you.
Sure.
It's
Oh,
not,
sure.
it's not SAU55 specific either. I can't even download those electronically to the New Hampshire Department of Education website. When I try to drop them in, they have to fax them through. It doesn't make sense, but that's,
Yeah,
Jen?
perfect.
Just a question on that. So the $17,000 for the courier,
Timberlane is paying upfront for that. And then when the SAU reimburses for that, Timberlane is then paying 77% of that reimbursement to ourselves?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, just like the lease.
Except you have the out-of-pocket expense with him.
Yeah,
Upfront.
it's an yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure I don't think I'm still not sure can wrap my head around that. So it's costing us double?
No. We pay for it up front, and then we get reimbursed. Whereas the lease, I think, is done a little bit differently. We don't actually pay it out. We just get the income from Hampstead. So,
Get the income from yourselves to the SAU, and then the combined income from Hampstead and SAU from Hampstead and Timberlane back to Timberlane.
In theory, that amount should be a little bit less than if we're,
Yeah, but in this case, there's no actual cost.
okay.
Yeah.
thank you.
All right, so that's, where are we now? That was contracted services, right? No.
Yes. Liability.
So, we already did office rental? Oh, never mind, okay, got it. Telephone, I lost my two budgets. Does telephone stay the same? Telephone on the pro forma goes to 0? We assume that,
Right, that's an expense that Timberlane pays that SAU reimburses for. So
Okay.
you'll see on the
okay,
last page, there's a loss of utilities/communications/supplies offset. And so that's reflected there. And so the general scheme
Okay.
here is that the general scheme is to look at and say, look, where do we have a tax impact? And if you're already paying it, it's not like you're going to be paying it again. But if you're paying it and being reimbursed for it through revenue, you're losing that revenue. So I point that out here.
So that explains why the numbers over time, the actuals are very flat and round, because SAU is just paying a fee to TRSD.
Correct.
And so that means that everything, because it's in this building owned by TRSD, it's already in TRSD's contract, or they're already
Budget.
contracted there. So it has nothing to do with Hampstead.
That's correct.
That's a clean break,
That's correct.
potentially.
And we
Okay.
don't look at the telephone bills because and a little bit about this building, for those who haven't had some experience here, when we take a look at who is in the building, we look and we note that some of our staff is SAU, some is Timberlane. So how do you, just for example, everyone who works on this floor is Timberlane. And half the people upstairs, or less than half, are Timberlane. We don't have an exact allocation for it. We put together a budget number and say, this is what we budget. And we don't look and say, well, gee, how does this compare with what we need to pay? That just gets paid, which is why you see the actuals matching up exactly to budget.
I was wondering how you did that. Thanks.
Isn't that good?
so I guess we can, this really takes care of, because I am cognizant of the time. We've spent about 45 minutes on this. So that really takes care of the brunt of this budget, because the next section goes into payroll, so, and staff. So I think maybe that's where we want to kind of move into. Because one of the questions that the committee has is, I think mainly in terms of who's working for Hampstead, who's working for Timberlane, and what's the % breakdown by the staff? Does everybody agree? Should we just move on to that? Because that's,
Yeah, no, at some point I wanted to understand some of the historical nature of the sick leave redemption, and then understand the, well, what do you call it? The additional employee benefits or something like that.
I can cover those. yeah.
Other employee benefits,
Yeah.
because that is an interesting number that's gone up significantly. 4 or 5 years ago, other employee benefits was 23,000, and then it went to 25,000, then to 47,000, then to 115,000, and then budgeted for 110,000. So I was curious as to what all that is, along with the sick leave redemption. We had quite a spike of sick leave redemption a couple of years ago, and then it's gone down.
Well-
I think isn't that really, they were underfunded in the sense that if you had several people cash out at once, we didn't have enough money, so they increased those numbers in the budgetary lines?
And that's on the other employee benefits line.
I can speak to that, because that predates Mr. Dowd's existence here. During the auditing process, they had noticed that we had quite a bit of unfunded liabilities, and so the auditors suggested that we create category and we start to partially fund, anticipating, it's hard to know because people don't announce their retirements 18 months in advance when we're budgeting, so we don't, it's a guess. Like, I didn't know, for instance, Dr. Wilson, I didn't know if she was gonna stay another year, she's retiring. But a year ago, when we were budgeting for it, we weren't sure how much longer she would stay. And so, part of that is, it's all contractual, so some of it's sick time, some of it's compensatory time, some of it's, what else is in there in terms of other employees? They're all post-employment.
Retirement incentive, we actually have a schedule.
They buy back vacation time, so.
So the sick leave goes to retirement, right? Just like the teacher's contract? So even though you've got it here on the budget, it's going into a fund somewhere else, and then when one of the administrators retire, then they get their sick leave pay?
No.
It's a cash payout when they leave, separation.
There are two things. One is paid out on an annual basis, so that short line for that sick leave redemption, which is on the pro forma budget line 2900-2225, right? That's for 4,500, starting with 4,500, ending at 4,700. That's for employees who are maxed out on their sick leave time or will likely be maxed out on their sick leave time, and they may be entitled to a redemption of that sick leave time should they not use it during the year. So that's contemporaneous with the year of employment. So that's one aspect of it. Then getting into and if you look at the other employee benefits on the budget classification detail along with the narrative on it, you'll see that there is an area there for sick day buyout. Well, that's if someone should leave and they should be entitled to a buyout, whatever time that they've still accumulated at the time of their separation, the remainder of it would be paid out at that time. So there's two buckets of you. One's contemporaneous with what would be paid out over max, and then upon separation, everything on the books remaining would then be bought out as well.
Okay. And you mentioned comp time. Comp time doesn't have money, right? Comp time is just time, like if you work a lot of extra hours?
Nope, comp time it's either money or time, and it's up to the employee, not the employer, of how it's cashed out.
Classified as deferred time payable.
Then isn't that overtime if it's paid? I mean, from the RSA I was reading, it said that it was just time. It didn't say anything about money.
It's not overtime. I mean, Mr. Dowd could respond.
Right, it's listed as deferred time payable, and if there's an option for an employee to use that time, they can use it. If they'd like to cash it in, that's fine. We talk about overtime, we talk about, and some of our staff might be, let's say 35 hours, and if they work 38 hours that week, they've got 3 hours of what we call extra hours. So it's not overtime, it's extra hours, just straight time is under 40 hours. So that's one component of extra time, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Should those hourly employees go over 40 hours, they may be entitled to overtime. They may elect to take overtime. They may say, hey, can I just put that, just leave that for comp time? It's not very common that that's done, but gee, I have something that I'd like to do next week. My workload this week was heavier than next week. Maybe we can just, fine, great, no problem. Usually something we can work out. When you look at deferred time payable, typically you're looking at someone, if it's an administrator or someone who's salaried, working time that they're not scheduled for. And that's not, for example, perhaps I've been here since 8:30 this morning. I don't have an 8-hour day, right? I'm going on, let's say 11 hours, maybe I've left for dinner and can come back. I don't get deferred time or comp time. But I have a certain number of days that I am required to work, for example, and going beyond those number of days, and that's just the way that the contracts are set up in the districts. That's typically where you would see a comp time accrual, if you will.
Okay, so the cash payout is for the non-exempt employees. The exempt employees, such as the administrators, there's no payout for the comp time, right?
Well, it wouldn't be for overtime, but it would be for working non-scheduled day, like days that they aren't getting paid for. We only get paid for a certain number of days. Now, within that day, it can be a 14-hour day. I don't know what the record is. 16 maybe? I have no idea.
So exempt employees are getting paid cash payouts if they're working on days that they would normally not be scheduled to work, say a Saturday or Sunday. So your question is, are there cash payouts to exempt employees? There are. And I think this year we've paid out probably of the order of 40 to 50,000. Am I correct?
We've now when you look at this number here, you're looking at what would have been used to compose the budget for the 1920 budget, the last budget cycle. But yes, we have that has been worked down, which I like, because I don't like carrying liabilities on the book if we don't have to.
So we've paid out probably 40 to 50,000 this year?
We have, yeah. Yeah, if not more, probably more. I don't have the exact number yet.
Probably more.
Yeah, which is good. We want those off, we want those, cleared off the books if we can, or at least at a lower number. And the reason being is, and let me just take a step back, when we send our assessments out, we agree on what that amount is going to be. Not to get things confused, but on the regular budget, you'll see that there is a district share portion, and for 2019-20, just under 500,000 for Hampstead, just under 1.6 million for Timberlane, and that's what is assessed to the district. Period. So each district cuts a check for that amount to fund SAU. We don't send a note over and say we need funding for payroll this week. It's just on a semi-annual basis. We rolled into that 25,000, so we reduced the total amount that the districts are paying in the total budget from 2.11 million to 2.086 million. But the problem becomes that I know the salaried people, I know all the people I'm going to be paying, I know a lot of the expenses I'm going to be paying, I budget and I pay it. It's very simple. But when we get into situations like retirement payouts and things like that, I'm not going to, and that's what my note, my description in the example is, I'm not going to say, well, I have $300,000, I have $400,000 in liability or buyouts that if everyone retired, I would have to pay out. I'm not going to budget that every year, because then I'm just sort of overcharging. So what audit they recommended, and this was before I did start, and I'm glad that they made that recommendation, was to build up that balance and to budget some factor, and that's in that other employee benefits line. So that's not meant to match up exactly with what the actual liabilities are. What that is meant to do is to be able to cover the cash needs. And if we don't, we don't really operate in the same way that the districts do, where if you have a surplus, unless it's encumbered, unless there's a warrant article capital reserve item, it is a reduction in the next year's taxes. The only thing that we've been reducing on a regular basis is about 25,000. The remainder of any surplus that SAU has had, for example, from that other employee benefits line, and you'll see the actual budget in 17-18, 114,678. We only paid out 47,000. So that additional built up our fund balance, so that at a later point, if we do have a year that we've only budgeted 100,000, but 200,000 needs to be cashed out, we have the ability to pay that out. It's a difficult concept because we're not budgeting the entire liability every year. We're just building up fund balance to be able to cover it. The district's a little bit different, but they have a greater ability to absorb it. With us, we don't have the ability to absorb it. We don't have the ability. I'm not going to budget $400,000, $300,000 for separation agreements or retirement benefits. No.
Yeah, I would want to take this one offline, because I've talked to other school districts and they don't pay comp time to the executive administrators. I mean, I'm an exempt employee, and when I work 70 hours a week, I don't get paid for those extra hours. And I thought that was the expectation of other exempt employees as well. And that's the way it reads here in the RSA. So I'd like to take that offline, please. Separate topic.
Do you mean well, that's not really that's not really a topic for this committee, but I can certainly take it under advisement to go to the SAU.
I would like that, yeah.
Okay.
Because that's a lot of money.
Okay.
You do have a policy and a procedure.
I've got
in the
copies
SAU.
of them, and they reference the RSA, and I pulled up the RSA, and the RSA says it's for hourly employees. It does not mention exempt employees at all.
They went to the labor board for that, I believe, and they got approval through HR, but
The exempt employees?
I'll check that with the labor board.
And the
So-
only reason is that the contracts, the employee contracts for teachers, for administrators specify a number of days. So it's not extra hours, it's not overtime. So if I'm here, it's my 12th hour today, I don't get, there's no comp time, right? There's no overtime, right? But if I were to be contracted to work for a certain number of days, 260, and I work beyond those days, or I work days that I'm not otherwise scheduled to work, like a Saturday or Sunday, that's where that comes in. It's not for extra hours. We don't get, it's not overtime.
Well, definitely, the SAU board will be taking a look at this.
Okay, thank you.
The line in general would still, no matter what, it's you have some liabilities, and that's what composes that line.
So, Barbara?
So what % funded are we compared to the possible maximum liability?
We're actually on track. We're very much on track, actually, in terms of what our funding is. I believe we're getting very close. I'm going to have to take a look at where we are at the end of the year.
So are you saying like 80% funded, 40% funded?
I think we're probably 80% at least.
Right.
If not more.
Barbara, it's a tough number because if a couple of employees left in the same year, we would be underfunded.
Understood.
Well, what makes it even more difficult is I have to project based on what the numbers are that I know of. So these numbers would be 17, 18 numbers.
Fortune telling is very difficult.
I know, being used for a 1920 budget.
I
You know,
understand.
so I'd have to check and see where we end up at the end of the year, but we're doing okay. But it's only been through a buildup over years. Some years we've been very close, some years we've been over in our expense, but we've been building it up, and that makes me happy, so.
So how do we, so we have a fund buildup balance there. If we do separate, how do we determine, because Timberlane has put into that and Hampstead
That's right.
over course of a few years, and contributions could fluctuate slightly between, so
The
how do
question
you,
is, should we withdraw? What happens to that fund balance?
and how do we separate
My
them?
understanding that there are some things that'll be black and white, and other things I think
Yeah.
you could be within a few percentage points, because if one year it was 22%, they're paying, next year they're paying 23% over a period of time. You're gonna be talking thousands of dollars either way.
Right,
So there probably would have to be some sort of agreement between the two districts about what the number is.
right.
Do you go with the current percentages? Well, the percentages were different 5 years ago, as that money was being built up.
Right.
Well, I think the bigger question is, if we withdraw, do we retain our percentage of that unretained, unspent fund balance? I'm not worried about the thousands I'm worried about,
I would say you have to.
well,
Right.
But you also have to pay out what you owe.
I don't know. We
I
do
guess
have
it
legal
depends.
counsel, I will take that question to legal.
Yeah.
Do we need to do that yet?
And we don't need to do that yet, but it's a question that we'll have to,
At some point, we'll have to
we'll have to,
figure
we'll
out
have to look
who gets
at,
the
should we
percent,
decide,
what's the percentage.
decide to move forward, so.
I had a question at the very beginning. Do you want me to address that in terms of who works for the SAU and what their responsibilities are? or
Well,
no?
yeah, I kind of want to move on to that, because I think it's if we're looking at yes or no, we're going to move forward, I think a huge part of that is, what do we have for employees? How is that time divided? And I don't think we'll get into what happens if we withdraw, what would our SAU look like? But I think for us, we need to have a breakdown of who's doing what right now, and I think there's somewhere in the packet that it speaks to this.
It does. I mean, there's the,
So
I
is
think
this-
the question was at some point, that you have
This,
job
this is,
descriptions, right?
these are job descriptions, and the question was, we have an administrative assistant business payroll here. What portion of this person's time is being devoted to the SAU, the district, our district, and Hampstead's? So that's, where's that breakout?
Of all the questions in terms of the follow-up from your first meeting, this is the most difficult one to kind of put your finger on. And even from my own personal perspective, I know what time I spent, right? So there are some people that think the assistant superintendent deals solely with Hampstead, and I deal solely with Timberlane, which is not the case, as you know. We both work in both districts. It's really two jobs. In any given week, I could spend 90% of my time in Hampstead and 10% in Timberlane. I may not have anything to do with Hampstead for 2 or 3 weeks. There really isn't a percent to really break down. It's two jobs, the assistant superintendent, the business administrator, your facilities director, your HR people, all your SAU employees are really working with two districts. Now, with 7 schools, is there more work? There is potentially more volume. But in any given week, 2 schools can create more work than 7 schools.
Okay.
It really isn't a percent breakdown.
So you can't give us a percent breakdown. So I think we need to move forward on the assumption that we don't have a percent breakdown, and if we decide to move forward, we're gonna have to look at what our SAU staff would be
But we
moving
know
forward.
everybody on this floor is Timberlane.
Yeah, well, so
So
I
that's-
don't want you to think of the SAU building as the SAU staff, because there's a lot of Timberlane employees
Okay,
in here.
that's, okay.
But I'm just talking about these 14 people. You can't give us a breakdown of who does
Well, I mean-
Hampstead and who does Timberlane. That's.
For the administrative assistants, perhaps, right? But not, for us, we do both districts.
Okay,
We work
so-
full-time in both districts, all of your
So
administrators.
when you say we, you're talking about the CFO, the Director of Human Resources, the Business Operations Coordinator, the Chief Executive Assistant, the Executive Assistant to the CFO. We cannot break those down. We have no idea what percent is,
I mean,
I'm just,
I know what you're asking.
because if we can't, we can't, that's fine, we move on. Can we break out administrative assistant accounts payable? Is that solely
There's-
Timberlane or not?
No, there's a couple of those, I think, through Jeff, you could probably, I mean, Kathy works in both districts, Melissa primarily. Hampstead? I mean,
She's
does she-
both.
She does both. The team, the HR team is a team serving both districts. I mean, but business, I mean, are there people that you would say only work in one district or the other?
Let's say that I have an administrative clerk who, and our admin assistant who handles payroll for, let's say, for Hampstead and SAU. It wouldn't be fair to say that that's a 100% dedicated employee to that district, because they also handle, that person may also handle responsibilities including free and reduced applications. So at a certain time of the year, because Timberlane has a much higher percentage of free and reduced and a much higher volume, that person who may be primarily on Hampstead and SAU for, let's say, payroll, would be dedicating 90% of their time to Timberlane. And this is where it gets a little bit dicey in terms of trying to assign a specific number, because the seasonality and the nature of our work oftentimes dictates that even someone whose work may be dedicated to one district, we don't really have a lot of those, at various times of the year, may be significantly more heavily weighted in the other district. How do you quantify that? So for a month, someone's 90% dedicated to one district. How do you attach a number to that?
I don't think we can, so, Jen?
Just an interesting observation, and I'm not looking to have a huge discussion about it, but as I'm listening to this, I'm looking at, okay, these, $1 million in salaries and how that's paid by each district based on student enrollment might not necessarily align with the work that those people do.
On a staff by staff basis?
Yeah. I mean, that $1 million is divided up by a set formula that we have based on district enrollments.
It's divided up, it's developed, right? It's created, or
It's, no.
It's apportioned.
it's a
Well,
portion.
It's apportioned
It's
by
apportioned
enrollment.
by enrollment.
It's apportioned by enrollments, but it does not
Necessarily align with.
with what the actual percentage of work that each person is doing, and it doesn't look like we can really get that number, so I think,
That's fine. It was just an observation. That's all.
Yeah.
No, Kim, I think you're right, in the sake of time. I think, SAU55, if you were to withdraw SAU55, you'd be creating a new SAU, and you'd have to determine what you wanted for staff and what you needed.
right, so I guess we have the answer for that. I'm actually on, I guess, 6 of the agenda, not that we're done with 5, but one question I have on this that says, this packet that says SAU job descriptions, we have 14 SAU employees right now, do we not? How many SAU employees are there?
I think you have, I think in the number of 14, we're talking somebody's 50/50, right?
Somebody split, right?
Race is split. The person that's the receptionist out front.
Yeah, it says it on there.
There's only 11 on here, right?
So these don't
So,
match up with
these
these.
don't,
And you have
Well-
open positions that aren't filled, so you don't have
Super and the
people there.
assistant super, and theirs are by statute, not by job description.
okay, but I guess I'm looking at job descriptions and so I'm counting 11 here. Does that mean that maybe there are 3 receptionists that have the same job description? I'm trying to match the number of job descriptions to the 14 people.
I don't have the job description in front of me. I can take a look.
Well, I don't even need, this is, well, yeah. This
In other words,
packet-
which one of these account for more than one person?
Yes, that's all I'm asking.
Well,
Yeah.
on this job,
Thank you.
transportation coordinator is on here, but not on here.
Oh, well, why
Good
is
point.
that?
That's one of them.
Okay, so this
Yeah, I
list
didn't
is
see that either.
incomplete then. There's one person missing on this one. So the transportation coordinator should be on here.
You're right, she's not.
So the question is.
Do I have this?
Who else is missing off of here?
Let's see.
No, I haven't gone through it all
Come
yet.
on, hurry up.
Super's not on there, and the assistant super's not on there.
Okay, so that brings us
14.
up to 14.
Perfect, thanks Kathy.
Okay, so now we have it.
Math is
quicker
a
than I
wonderful
was.
thing.
All right. We have it now.
And Kim, not to go, but a perfect example, transportation coordinator, well, over the past, 6 months, 3 months, however, it's been a significant dedication to working, reworking, reviewing, working with our vendors on transportation. Well, that might be this year, and perhaps in, 2 years ago, there was a review of Hampstead's transportation. So it's just so hard to put a number on
Right.
what that is.
And back to the transportation coordinator. So she's coordinating transportation for the students that are going to Pinkerton? Does she coordinate transportation for all the special education students from kindergarten up to high school within Hampstead also?
Yes.
All the
I-
Hampstead students and all the
All the
Timberlake
Hampstead,
students.
okay.
I-
Just because I know in terms of apportionment, it's not based on the high school students.
For Hampstead. And I'm not,
Or for-
Should be, yeah.
You know what I'm saying.
I do.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure how much of that is done by our transportation coordinator, or how much is done with the schools themselves, but she would oversee that generally in terms of coordination and that.
Well, Hampstead doesn't have a transportation coordinator, right?
No, but.
Oh, it is Pinkerton.
Pinkerton.
And Pinkerton doesn't have a transportation coordinator, so I guess that would mean that our transportation coordinator must be coordinating that for all
Send-
their
The
students.
sending towns are responsible to get their students to and from Pinkerton,
Okay.
from all the different towns. Because they all have your own we have a 3-tiered system in Hampstead buses. There's 3 separate tiers, meaning they do the elementary run, the middle school run, and the high school run, which is it's a little more complicated than the 2 tiers we have here.
That's interesting. All right, so I guess does anybody else have questions? So it doesn't look, one of the questions we had last time was the breakout, and it doesn't look like we can really get that. Okay. So where do we need to move back to? I guess, going back to should we go, then it makes, are there any other questions then in terms of the pro forma versus the current budget? I guess we should, just for those that, again, new to the committee here, if you take that pro forma budget and flip to the back, you'll see that there's standalone costs, additional costs are 1.3 million. I explain the assumptions that you made in terms of contractual obligations that is causing that number to be so high. Timberlane's additional obligation, should we withdraw in 1920?
Well, when I look at what, and I had to,
1920.
Kept doing the same
2020. Oh,
But-
you're
What are we
19.
looking at?
We know you're talking 2 different years when you say 1920. I do now, at least.
so I had to look and say, okay, what, if Timberland were to withdraw from SAU, there are still, and you had made a request, I think, for some long-term obligations, or longer-term obligations or contractual obligations. And some of those are for positions where there are contracts that may go into that period where it would be beyond the period of withdrawal. And I don't know how that is going to work out. There was an obligation of the SAU into those periods. I have included the pro rata share of Timberlane for that year relative to what those amounts would be. Again, it's a very good discussion to have. I would think that if there is a withdrawal at that time, there are these contractual obligations in terms of you'll see the 76.1% for the superintendent, CFO, BA, and this operations coordinator for that year. Above that, there is not one included now in Timberlane's budget for facilities director.
Just clarification, are you referring to contractual obligations on this landscape?
Well, I'm looking at the back of this sheet, and yeah, you should see the contractual obligations, I believe, on that sheet.
When you're talking about contractual obligations that extend
Correct.
beyond, you're talking about those on this landscape?
And are they just personnel contracts, or are they also other things that we use for both school districts?
Well, here we're looking primarily at personnel contracts.
Okay.
And I do have a separate schedule. You're tired of me saying, that's okay.
It doesn't have any dates on it.
Of contractual obligations on a long-term basis, and it looks a lot like this, just to address that. It's called vendor contractual obligations.
Yep.
I really don't see this rough listing of what services we may engage for, what we may participate in, what we may use. I don't really see anything on this list that would go beyond that time. You'll see that there is the lease for the space here in the building. From a vendor perspective, I will,
Are you assuming they're all gonna come due that same year? Are you lumping it all into 1 year? Or would those be spaced out?
no, that's just the year. That's just like that 1 year.
Okay, so that's April, and so,
Not adding all together into one simple year.
As you work to enhance this for us, could you also add, say, another couple of columns, such as, so that we could see when the contracts run out and then see how those numbers change?
Meaning
over-
subsequent years?
Yeah. So obviously, some of these contracts expire in 2021. So what would the contractual obligations be if we separated after 2021? What would, is that a fair
Right.
request? I'm
So-
new to this.
Yes, that's a fair request, because right now, and I have sent all contracts to legal counsel. We are looking at, we have two, when you look at this pro forma budget, I think I can maybe explain some of this. The facilities director right now is the business operation coordinator. Timberlane does not have one. When that person retired, the SAU is now doing that function. That contract runs till 2021. So in this pro forma budget, there's an assumption made that Timberlane, should we withdraw, is going to have to pay that salary because that contract is still there. The business administrator's contract runs through 2021. So should we withdraw, we would have to pay that. And these other numbers that are being added in are for that. The superintendent's contract runs through 2022. So if we leave in 2021, we're going to be obligated for our portion of that contract. Now, the other thing that was added in here is a facilities director at 90,000. But if we leave in 2021, that 90,000 is offset by the fact that we don't have the contractual obligation. So your point is perfectly taken. We need to see should we leave in 2021? Should we leave in 2022? What this is going to look like? Because we're under no obligation if we move forward to leave in 1920. We could have a transition year and leave in 2021, or even as late as 2022 if the voters approve it and the State Board of Education.
And so what you have here in that schedule, just so you have the perspective on it, I know that there had been, I'm only going on the best that I can put together and assume it's going to be up to this committee to make those final determinations. What I'm trying to do is to have that discussion and help everyone understand what the perspective is. So you see the facilities director listed because I've heard that, and it's worked into, the salaries haven't changed tremendously in the projected year for SAU or for what that SAU staff would be, whether they're SAU standalone, SAU, or whether they're integrated into the district. They would essentially be the same, but I've heard a little bit about having either an assistant business administrator back in that position, more of a finance role, or an assistant finance director in that role. So then that takes that business operations coordinator, facility support out, which would necessitate, and again, that's up to this committee as to how that's going to pan out, but that would then, I think, create the need for a dedicated facilities director, particularly, it has nothing to do with this committee, I shouldn't even mention it, particularly with if there is a bond or there are some renovations or improvements being proposed, if that were to be a dedicated position, I've included that for consideration, and here we are having a discussion on it, and I hope it's productive.
Okay, and another thing that I would like to see on this pro forma budget, I think it's a little, not the right word here, is a little misleading on this pro forma budget to say that our loss of rental income is $42,250. I really think that should be changed to the 23% that Hampstead is paying. Mm-hmm. Same thing with the loss of offset for the couriers. So let's make this offset of loss of revenue what it realistically is, not the fact that we're losing $42,000, but we always paid ourselves back 77% of that, because that to me is a misleading cost of our withdrawal. It's because it's really not a cost.
My goal here definitely is to have the discussion, have a good understanding as to what it is, and make sure that the net impact to the taxpayers is reflected. So that's if that's that's the way that it is. We've had the discussion, looked at it, and that's what the committee that's the way the committee is going.
Right, and I don't think I'd also like the facilities director removed from this pro forma budget, because that is something that I just don't think goes as a cost.
Where is that on here?
This?
Missing
back here.
Facilities director.
He's a superintendent who's leave.
that's what that,
We're
okay,
gonna have to
sorry.
add a facility, and I don't think that's,
That position is not currently filled?
So it includes
Yep.
all the benefits, the FICA retirement and the insurance under that as well.
right.
It's not currently filled, and I'm looking at this, and it's very difficult. We're looking at this from what a standalone SAU would be, or essentially if a standalone SAU, right, a single district SAU is funded by the district, what the total tax impact on the taxpayers is. And so when I look at this, is that facilities director, or would that be an SAU function? Again, I'm just looking at this from what the total tax impact would be. And, you know, it's very important to make sure that wherever this committee decides, whether it's feasible, whether it's not feasible, that those numbers are articulated and discussed by the committee. And I know, you know, just for example, we had, even this committee, having been set up by warrant article, right? No money was associated with it, but I've approved money for legal in billing. You know, I've approved a purchase order for $30,000. So
That's not through this committee. That's through the Timberlane School Board,
that's the Timberlane School Board.
who does have money in legal funding, legal funds, in our legal line, correct? Do we not have money in legal lines? for
We're a bit
Timberlane?
out. I'm going to be having to go to the committee, the board, to,
The board did approve the expenditure of legal funds.
that's why I issued,
We're gonna need a
We're gonna need a
budget
transfer.
transfer.
that's why I issued the purchase
Money
order.
left in the legal line.
Yeah, it was that authority under which I issued the purchase
We
order.
do have a legal line
No, I know
in
there's-
the Timberlane, we do have a legal line in the Timberlane budget. It's not, I'm not asking if it's been spent or not.
Oh, yeah, no, we have a legal line. This, that cost, I think, came about as a result of this committee getting off. Is it good to have that? Yes, you should be having an attorney on this, absolutely, to guide the process. But in terms of making sure that this reflects what that warrant article read, what the impact is to the taxpayers, I'm putting it out there, that's all, for discussion.
So, on the back of this pro forma budget, the salaries line, $1,069,000, that includes the current facilities position shared with Timberlane and Hampstead, or, I'm sorry, I'm not.
That includes.
Business operations coordinator, who is responsible for facilities, correct?
Correct, which is not just facilities, but facilities.
Yes,
part of it, yeah.
yes. So, but then we have added below $90,000 for facilities director.
Right.
So that feels to me almost like it's added in twice.
Well, the reason it's added in twice is, if we withdraw in 1920, and assuming that the contractual obligation has to be fulfilled because it was signed through 2021, then we will not have a business operations coordinator. We're withdrawing. So that means that we're going to have a facilities, or what is called a business. We're going to have to, so yeah, we'd have to pay twice that year. This is why we need to move out to 2021, 2022, and take a look at this. But I still don't like the assumption that there's, well, a facilities director put into the pro forma budget, the SAU pro forma budget, because that would be a cost associated with the Timberlane district. It would certainly be a tax impact, I'm not saying that, but you also have to look at, as you restructure, what that's going to do with not only the standalone SAU, but what it's going to do with the district staff. Because when you start to look at single district SAUs, which I know you guys looked at, you do see some of the staff kind of subsumed into the district. So it can't be looked at just as that. So I'm not in favor of putting that 90,000 into that SAU pro forma budget. It would not go, it's not an SAU, it doesn't go there.
I think that it certainly has served its purpose, and I hope that everyone has found that discussion to be fruitful and productive, because I certainly have gotten a lot out of hearing it. What I'm debating is, so when this goes, if this were to go through, I'm not sure how it would go on the warrant, but if it were to go through, whatever year it is, there would be a cost associated with it, I assume, right?
I do not think so. I don't think that's how it goes on the warrant.
No.
Is there a cost in it,
It
or is
doesn't
that
go
just
on the
goes part
warrant.
of the feasibility study?
No,
Well,
it doesn't go on the warrant. It goes, I
If it
think
go-
it
if it-
says by RSA how it goes on the warrant.
We would have to have a public hearing
Right.
so that, that the voters would understand what the actual plan would be.
And what the cost would be, but on the warrant, it will only say, shall the school district accept the provisions of RSA 194C, providing for the withdrawal from a school administrative unit involving school districts of Hampstead and Timberlane, in accordance with the provisions of the proposed plans? Yes or no? There would not be a cost in that,
The warrant article
in the
itself.
warrant article. The warrant article is dictated by the RSA.
By the RSA. And it's interesting, is that we would still be budgeting, right, for the SAU as part of that March ballot, right? Because you would still be budgeting for it,
Yeah.
because if it doesn't pass, you would still have the SAU costs. So if that were to go through, let's say we're, for whatever reason, more expensive to opt out in that particular year, where does the money come from? Because the budget committee wouldn't be budgeting for that. And typically, like, if we want to do something, we want to, I don't know, spend $50,000 on, and I'll just say, just be funny, the track, right?
Well,
We put that on the
it would
warrant.
be a separate warrant, I suppose. I think you'd have to put a warrant to reflect that.
We
I
often
don't know.
have contingent articles,
Right.
so it
Should
would
this
take.
pass?
Yeah, exactly.
Should,
And can it be for a future time? Like
It
if
can
we
also-
put it in
yes.
March, say for 2022,
Right, we can't
is
do
when it
that.
happens, because then you need to prepare a new SAU, you need to hire employees, you need to get everything
Right,
in
a lot
place.
of districts, and there's a list in your packet
Yeah.
of, I think, 10 withdrawal plans for different districts.
Mhm.
A lot of districts will do a one-year transition, because should we withdraw, we're gonna need an SAU staff, and there's gonna have to be some time for that to happen.
Right.
And there, depending on what who Hampstead wants to, that would all, I have to be negotiated.
And we have to include the impact on Hampstead fiscally and educationally and as part of
We
the
do,
RSA.
but it's not gonna be in the level of detail that,
Right.
that our impact is.
No,
It's
you
gonna
just
be
have
more
to,
general.
you just have to give an impact,
Yeah,
which is why, when we start looking at the pro forma budget for Timberlane, understanding the Hampstead pro forma, and what their impact might be, because when we started off, we were talking about what would Hampstead be compared to ours, because there are some things that are gonna be the same. If they have their own superintendent, we have a superintendent.
so is this
cost is
committee
gonna be-
asking for a pro forma budget for Hampstead?
I would like, because
Okay.
we have to take into account what it would look like
Yeah, okay.
at the SAU level.
So can we make that an action item, then we have a pro forma budget for Hampstead?
That's up to Hampstead. That's not up to this committee.
It's
No,
part of our
it is-
RSA
it's part
that
of
we
our-
have to-
It is part of our obligation under this RSA to
Their
look
chair
at
has
the fiscal.
directed, their chair has directed, so you're gonna have to work that out at the SAU level with the SAU board. You're asking me to do something that's a Hampstead work product, and now you're asking to make it a Timberlane thing. That's, you know that that's a problem, right? So I think you should work that out at the SAU level, the SAU board.
Well, that's,
That's
we
a
can bring it to
Hampstead.
the SAU, and
I'll bring it to the SAU board.
they're meeting, I can't remember what, they're coming up. Thursday.
Oh, this week.
I don't share Timberlane plans with Hampstead or Hampstead plans. They're
That's fine.
reorganizing.
That's fine, it's just we have to take it into consideration what the impact will be on there, so we
Right.
would have to understand the cost impact to them. Per the RSA that's on this agenda, it states we have to look at the fiscal and educational impact to the districts remaining in this SAU.
So I understand.
So-
You're leaving the SAU, so the SAU's staying with Hampstead.
Well, I understand, but we still have to look at what
We
their
still have to
cost would
look at
be.
the impact.
Because it
Well,
could
there
be
is-
that they
there
have
is
an
no impact
increase.
to Hampstead.
Yes, there is.
They-
Of course there's an impact to Hampstead.
They're reorganizing, there's no impact.
Explain.
Okay, so, well,
Can I
maybe,
just,
wait.
Yeah.
I would appreciate it if you would put that in writing as the superintendent, that there will be no impact to Hampstead should Timberlane withdraw. I think that would
I'll take that
suffice
under
for the
advisement.
depart,
I'll take
I
that
think
under
that would, I think that would suffice for the Department of Education.
Yeah, I'll take that under advisement,
Yeah.
and I'll speak with the Hampstead chair, and I'll let you know.
Okay.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think it's all a good discussion, and it's all information. We do have to, by RSA, include that information in a plan. But we're not at that point
That's true.
of a plan right now. So I think we're jumping the gun just a little bit.
Okay, you're right. So, hold on, getting back to the agenda. I think we've talked, I lost my agenda.
You may be ready to move on. Before you do, though, I did want to put out just a couple more aspects for your consideration in terms of what that withdrawal plan or what the total costs are going to be. In a similar way to what you have in front of you for example, accrued time or retirement incentive and all that goes with the SAU. The SAU does have some long-term obligations, and I'm requesting, it's part of an update that we're doing to complete the audit for our GASB other post-employment benefits liability. But I've asked them, it's taking a little longer, so I have to apologize, that's going to hold up the audit, to come up with what that other post-employment benefits liability would be at a point. Because I think that's another liability to consider. How does that get dispensed with? How does that get handled? Now, I may know at a certain point, right, what the liabilities are for, let's say, a retirement incentive. I may know what because someone retires or separates, we'll end up paying it out. But the other post-employment benefits line is problematic because it goes so far out into the future. We're talking about when someone retires and we subsidize a benefit for them. What is the cost of that benefit going to be at the time that we subsidize it? How many years would they take it? It's not, again, I can quantify and say, well, a retirement benefit is this if it's paid out then. I can use some factors and assumptions and say, yeah, I can predict that out maybe a year or 2 years with some variables. But the other post-employment benefit long-term liability is a little bit more problematic. So I will put that out there. It's just a point for consideration. I wanted to put that on the radar. The other thing is that SAU is obligated to certain, to its share of the New Hampshire retirement system as well, in terms of a long-term liability. So that is out there. I don't know what it will be if there were to be a separation or a date certain as to what the exact date would be. I don't know what the exact amount would be. I don't know. I put those out there for consideration. It's very, very confusing because there were like almost 3 different buckets of, we have this other employment benefit that we talked about. We have other post-employment benefits, which are longer term, and then we have the New Hampshire retirement system liability, our share of their liability as well.
Okay, yeah, Jen and I were both actually, she was writing the question as I was leaning over to her. We're going to have to ask the other districts because we are not the first ones to do that. And as Karen is, there's a sheet in our package showing all the districts that have been withdrawn from SAUs. There's got to be an answer to that.
This is just within the last 10 years.
Just within
for
the last
folks
10
who
years.
wanted
So
to do
that-
some
That
research
should
on
be an
it.
easy question to get an answer from. We do need to try to contact somebody who's gone through a withdrawal, a committee member, and maybe have those discussions with them. Because a lot. You want to? Great.
Well, one.
She volunteered.
Well, no, one. Well, I'm jumping ahead a little bit because part of my task from last time we met was to reach out and find out who a point of contact would be at DOE for us, should we
that's
have
right,
questions in the process. And so I had a very good conversation with somebody at DOE today, and she had mentioned probably beneficial to talk with other districts, both who have gone through this process and decided yes to move forward with withdrawal, and districts who have gone through this process and decided not to move forward with the withdrawal. And she did mention one particular person who sat on a committee that she knew that she could get me in touch with. I can't remember off the top of my head if they went through it or didn't go through it, but I could certainly reach out to that person and ask how they dealt with some of this.
Excellent. May I ask one other question?
You can.
We've talked, first of all, thank you very much. This has been very helpful, all the finances. But I know one of the main reasons why we have an SAU is to have the economies of scale, right? Like if I have 2 children who are going to summer camp, it costs this much for one, but if I send the second one, I get a discount. So same with Timberlane and Hampstead. What economies of scale would we potentially be losing? Not necessarily just the contracts and when they expire.
It's funny that you ask that. I think I have a schedule for that. Let's see.
Is that in the packet?
It's the shared services between Hampstead School District.
Lovely.
It's actually a double-sided document.
Right, there it is. Sure looks like.
So for student, I heard, and again, I apologize, I'm still learning, that Hampstead has a separate contract.
You do.
Than we do, okay. But we still have some benefit because we're in the same SAU?
We have benefit because we're in the same SEU, and they were bid out as either separately, right, or as a joint, I don't say bid, joint response, however you want to put it. Durham Services are a special transportation provider. We didn't build that out as separate districts. We build that out, I believe, as one bid for both districts. So I don't have a benchmark to say what a cost savings would be there. But for student, we did bid that out as both districts as part of the SAU and each district individually. So the basis under which I can demonstrate the cost savings is what it would be for each district individually versus what it actually is altogether.
So that's where you're coming up with us deriving a benefit of about 105,000 over 5, or 120,000 over 5 years. For Timberlake,
Timberlake.
yes, we did that, okay.
Correct.
Where's where's that?
It's the third bullet down.
Oh,
It says-
120,000
Per year.
Per year.
per year.
Mark's doing some
5
math.
years.
I thought that was we're saving $100,000 a year on that contract? I thought it was $100,000 over the course of the 3-year contract.
Oh, God, no.
No?
No,
$100,000 a year?
it's a big difference. And if you think about it, in this.
So if this were to go through, 2 years from now, in theory, we would be losing the benefit of that $122,000 per year because we would not be in the combined contract with them. Correct?
Well, that would be correct, yeah. Yeah, it's 115,000 in year 1, 119 in year 2, 122, 126, 129, almost 130 in the
Okay, so
final
it's
year.
a step up.
Yeah, it's a step up. And when you think about this is a perfect economy of scale because whether you have 29 buses that Timberlane has, or you have the 29 plus 9 that Hampstead has, you have one garage, one shop you can park them all at, one mechanic, one safety coordinator, and one dispatcher. So carry those out through the term of the contract, and you come up with some significant savings.
May I comment on that?
Yeah.
My only comment on that, looking long-term, and that may be how it worked out this time, but I still recall my very first SAU meeting, this conversation came up, and Hampstead said they put their bus contract out to bid, and they looked at it, if they could realize greater savings by going out on their own, because they were a smaller district, and they knew some bus companies could not handle Timberlane because we were a much larger district. So if they could have gotten a better contract through another vendor because they were small, then they would have gone that way. If they could have gotten a better contract by, combining with Timberlane because of the benefit of having a larger contract, then they would have gone that way. So there was no guarantee that that really is going to be a benefit for us at any point in time. Because if Hampstead could have gotten a better contract going on their own because they were smaller, they absolutely would have done that.
Did they?
No, they did not.
They didn't.
Because
they
it was a
couldn't.
benefit of the economy of scale.
Correct.
Yes, but you can't make that assumption that that's going to be forever.
Right.
That's a good
I
point.
think in business in general, companies like, First Student or others try to encourage that, be it the day camp example that we used earlier, or the bus, or sending my 2 kids to college now. Generally, the way business is, there is an advantage to combining forces.
But this was
And
almost
this-
in the reverse, because we are so large, we are a disadvantage for some bus companies
There's
that wouldn't
less
entertain
competition.
taking us.
How long is the
Some of the
contract
smaller
for?
bus companies won't take us.
Until 22-23.
Okay.
It's actually a 3-year contract, I believe, with 2-year options, but if we go to the max life of the contract, and whether Timberlane separates from the SAU or not, those contracts would still stay in place. They were bid out collectively, the contracts are with each individual district. Hampstead's cost savings over that time is, it's $613,000 over that time. For Timberlane, Hampstead's cost savings was $400,000, almost $400,000 even, over those 5 years contract.
So, if I could? So sometimes it's a little bit of a monopoly, so the transportation thing, the bus thing is an interesting concept to like try to wrap your head around savings, because the opposite was true about like food service, for instance. The food service was a combined contract, and they were losing money on Hampstead. So they were fine when Hampstead decided to go with a different food service provider. But they were doing that as a favor to the SAU, not a favor, they were just doing that, we wanted both districts. So it's, each thing's a little bit different, but we were, I think Kim and Jen could speak to this too. We were a little disappointed when we went out to bid that there were so few bidders in terms of a contract with that much money. I mean, it's $3.7 million. We really thought we were gonna get all these bus companies, and we really didn't. And we bid it 3 ways, right? We said bid in on each contract, we bid on each district individually, and then give us a group bid. And some of them, 1 or 2 of the companies only bid on Hampstead only, or only bid on Timberlane only, and then we had the combined bids, which both districts went with, I think, the best option that was provided to them. But it's just different with, depending on what we go out for.
And I think in this case, when you consider the actual physical facilities and the plants that are required to store and house these buses, these garages, these shops, the maintenance people and the repair people and the people that operate dispatch and all of that, coordinate all that staffing, you can see that significant economy of scale with First Student was present, where if we look at food service, there are some efficiencies, but
The deal breaker was really startup costs for a new company to take over.
I'm not seeing another company, ABC Busing Company, coming in the next 5 years, being able to bid for something this large, and, yeah, understood.
And my only comment was that it's not a guarantee, and should Hampstead be able to get what they feel is a better deal by going on their own, because they are smaller and they do have more options available to them being smaller,
Right.
then they would do that.
At this point, it's not, and probably won't for the next several years for them, in all likelihood. But at this stage, it's not. Regardless, at this stage, it was a benefit for us. So the economies of scale with the busing did work this time around for both parties.
It did, but it was only by default, because Hampstead did not.
Understood.
Hampstead-
Oh, understood.
So, okay, just want to make that clear.
Yep.
Kim, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
To backtrack a little bit, you talk about Durham Services, and you said that we pay out for that right now. When we get the stipend, when the state comes from the stipend, because these kids with IEPs and special needs and stuff, we get a higher payout from the state. Whose bottom line is that hitting? Is that hitting Hampstead's bottom line, or is that hitting our bottom line?
well, Durham provides our special transportation.
Yes.
And each district has its own contract with Durham, operating each district, well, and I should say, operating each district solely, and whatever reimbursement we get for, let's say, transportation, anything that Timberlane gets for transportation reimbursement or reimbursement related to that goes with that student, which goes with that district. And, I don't want to confuse things, but from a technical perspective, we do look for efficiencies in transporting our students. And if we have one student riding to an out-of-district placement, for example, from Hampstead, they're paying the full cost of that bus. If we can couple that, partner that, or share that ride with a Timberlane student, now we've cut the cost for both districts in half.
Okay.
But again, if either student generates a reimbursement from the state for whatever reason relating to that transportation, the district paying for it would get that reimbursement. Each district in that case would just base their reimbursement on the half.
Because you said we were paying Durham Services. I might have misunderstood. We were paying them directly, and then it comes back afterwards, correct?
If it comes back from the state, it would come back as part of that overall reimbursement.
But we would get the credit even if it was a Hampstead student?
No, Hampstead would get Hampstead's credit. We would get, Timberlane would get Timberlane student
Gotcha.
credit.
Quick question. Who's the third district in the Time Clock Plus? You mentioned that before, and I thought it sounded odd, but it's written here again.
SAU.
So SAU is considered a district, and so that's why, okay. Thank you.
I don't think it's considered a district, I think it's more of an entity.
It's an entity.
Entity,
Right, yeah.
For our purposes of.
not a school
redistricting.
district, an entity.
So-
Thank you.
I think we should move on to the reports from the other,
I just had
Yeah,
one
go
more
ahead.
question. So we talked a lot about liabilities. We touched briefly on assets. Do we have a list of assets that the district owns?
You will be pleased to know, well, the district meaning the SAU, right?
Correct.
You'll be pleased to know that the district owns virtually nothing.
Except for that retirement account.
the SAU.
Yes. SAU, the
Sorry,
SAU,
the
excuse
SAU
me.
owns virtually nothing. Timberland owns this building, owns the table that you're sitting at right now. We do own SAU owns a very sharp fingerprinting machine, which anyone who's been in to do volunteer work knows. That is a piece of equipment that does belong to SAU. But aside from that, there's
Well,
not.
I'm talking more about the funds. We have a general fund, we have the retirement fund, are there any other funds?
In SAU, no, we only have that. We only have one general fund. So,
And the retirement benefits that we're saving up for are part of the general fund?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is the balance of the general fund at this point?
I will give you the the fund balance at last audit was 128,644, which is probably increased by 50,000 since then. It's probably about level since then, so under 200,000, I would guess.
Thank you.
That was good information. No asset, other than the fingerprinting machine, no real assets to speak of.
It seems so odd to believe, but
I mean, I would have thought there would have been like something like,
Oh, but like already recorded, that's all Timberland.
it's all Timberlands.
Right.
yeah.
Right.
No, good information, thank you.
Yep, and that's why you'll see on the pro forma budget, there may be a number associated with hardware allocation. And that hardware allocation is what SAU pays, if you will, for this hardware that Timberland owns. That's why.
Thank you.
Certainly.
The teachers that are completely different as far as doing collective bargaining and setting a contract, so there's nothing to break there, right?
No, it's separate.
Okay.
And the paras,
Yeah.
those are separate collective bargaining groups, which is Timberland only.
Oh, Mark.
Just to circle back, and I certainly hope I don't regret this, was it, I feel like I already am. The discussion regarding the facilities director right now, just so that I have an understanding, the position is currently open, and the business ops coordinator is, no.
No. Timberlane does not have a facilities person. It's the business operation coordinator does it for both districts.
Okay.
Both districts have that position vacant, previously the director of facilities. So Hampstead had a director of facilities,
Yep.
Timberland had a director of facilities, those positions were vacated. So our business operations coordinator handles that, in addition to assist with transportation and food service,
Okay.
And
maintenance of
historic,
grounds, custodians.
historically, that had been part of the assistant business administrator role, which morphed into a business operations coordinator role, which now is sort of supporting both districts because there's not a facilities director in either in that capacity. However, that positions in the SAU, that business operations coordinator positions in the SAU budget, my impression from the Timberlane district is that they would prefer to have either an assistant finance director or an assistant business administrator in finance capacity. And therefore, that would necessitate a separate facilities director, which is why you see salaries generally
Understood.
unchanged and the addition of a facilities director. It wouldn't change, but it would just, that business ops coordinator in that new SAU would be assistant finance director or something.
But those just come down to organizational decisions.
That's right, yeah.
Oh, I have that too.
Okay, so I'm going to try to move this along a little quicker here because I think everybody's going to need time to digest some of this. But the next item on the agenda is the timeline for the withdrawal plan. Thanks to Karen. It's a big sheet with a blue header. We talked about this last time in general, what this would need to look like, doing a backwards plan. So if you take a look at this, if we decide to move forward, just so you know why we're having to have so many meetings, we would be, in order to meet the requirements by RSA, we would be looking at a public hearing in the middle of August, should we move forward with this. So I'll let everybody, you can take a look at this. It kind of gives the timeline and the RSA guidelines. So thanks, Karen, for putting that together. Also in your packet, there's a list of SAU withdrawal links. So Kathy will get all this posted for several SAUs that have not all of these have actually withdrawn. Some of them did not. So that will give the committee more of a look at. Yes, Jen?
One that somebody had recommended, I don't know if we can look to add it, that did not I think did not go through the withdrawal, was Jaffrey Ringe.
I think
Is that on
Auburn?
here?
Auburn did not go through withdrawal,
Right.
and that's on there. So Jaffrey, Ringe, I haven't actually looked at all these, so
I think Wyndham Pelham had a pretty smooth,
I have not been able to find their,
don't
I
have
can't
it.
find the documents
but we'd
online.
imagine we'd have access to somebody
Well,
this close, right?
I know, it's a question of somebody's gonna have to ask them for those documents, because I haven't been able to find Wyndham's.
I'll get them.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, their administrative staff has changed, they're all new people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Superintendents
we,
are different, so I, you would imagine there has to be, you must have access to somebody that was on those committees.
oh, yeah. So John, you wanna see if you
Yeah,
can?
I'll reach out to
dig
them.
that up,
Right.
so that would be great. Okay.
It's a high number. SAU Wyndham is 95, so that must have been recent.
It
Was,
was,
it was-
it was,
Yeah.
yeah.
It was in 2012, I think, or
Yeah.
13, yeah,
Pretty
just the last
recent.
5 or 6 or 7 years.
May I ask a quick question,
Yeah.
Kim? I wasn't sure, I guessed. I've never put an article on the warrant, and when is the deadline for that? So I just guessed that it had to be by the end of December.
We typically have them written by December, right, and the
Right,
board's,
right. The
you
board
know,
finalizes
kicking
it.
and punching them before the public hearing in January. Right, so usually you have them all set by.
So by the end of December, was that a fair
Ideally-
estimate?
Yeah, ideally, before Christmas break is ideal to have your articles kind of all flushed out and the wording and everything, so you get them to the proper people, attorneys and
Okay.
DRA, right, to look at them.
Okay, I'll move that up
This
one.
warrant is dictated by statute, so it's not gonna take much to, it's just gonna go in per RSA.
Okay, I just wasn't
So,
sure what the real
it's-
deadline was, I just guessed.
So, yeah,
Unless
no.
there was something you did to it, for like a contingent, you know,
Well, but that would be a separate warrant, I mean, that would be separate from that, so we
Yeah,
can get
End
that.
of year submit warrant article, it's fair.
Yeah, and by the end of the year, because that's not, at that point, I think it's gonna be easy, so. And then Barbara put together, there's what I called it a short history of the SAUs and supervisory unions. So you can read through that, and she showed, this was interesting in that she pulled out a document that shows what the administrative costs for a district should be by enrollment, because as you get larger districts, the percent of the total expense for general admin typically goes down. So we don't need to discuss that tonight, but I think it's good background information.
It shows the economies of scale.
The
when you get a
economies of
larger-
scale, yeah.
One thing that I was tasked with that I is not in here that I could not come up with, that's part of that historical piece. When I spoke with Yui about any original agreement for SAU55, SAU55 was one of the original SAUs back from 1919. So in 1919, there was no agreement per se because the state had sole control over the SAUs and told districts, you will go to this one, you will go to this one. So districts didn't have an agreement like that. And that original SAU from 1919 included Salem, Atkinson, Plastow, Southampton, and I can't remember if Newton was in
Newton,
it. And
yeah.
Newton was in it. So I'm not sure at which point Salem withdrew, Southampton and Newton
So-
withdrew, but Hampstead, Plastow, and Atkinson were part of that original 1919. So there would not have been an agreement between those districts because the state
Had put
made
those
that
together.
marriage.
And the nice thing was the state was paying for the superintendent at that time.
Yes, up until the mid-'80s, yes.
Yeah.
And Barbara did note when these, Southampton left in 52, Salem and Newton left in 67, so there's a lot of good information here.
But that's why I think that it's so hard, and the person I spoke with at DOE said she would dig around a little bit, but the guess is that there is no original agreement because it wasn't an agreement.
It wasn't,
was
it was a
dictated by the
one-pager.
state.
There was a one-pager that showed who's
Yes.
in one SAU, and they just, that was, I don't know, so
Yep.
that's that. And then, as I said, Karen put together SAUs that have, or withdrawals that have gone through in the last, what was this, the last 10 years? I guess we
Yeah,
should
just
put a
last 10
title.
years.
These are the last 10 years. And then Jen, Barbara, and I, and you're gonna wanna probably read through this, we were tasked with looking at the two strategic plans from Hampstead and Timberlane, and looking at highlights of common themes and differences. That's the document that's titled Withdrawal on the top. Okay, so also what we did was we had a list of pros and cons. Should we withdraw, what are the pros and what are the cons? So I think we want to read through that for next time. And then Jen also pulled some more historical information, which was very interesting, on the reform of SAUs in the mid-90s, and it really lays the basis for what Karen was talking about as to why so many SAU withdrawals have happened in the last 20 years. It was really primarily, I think, due to this legislative piece in 1996, and it was due to the fact that the state was pulling funding from SAUs, and districts were actually, it was costing districts a lot to maintain these SAUs. So there's some interesting information here. I don't like to pass out a whole bunch of documents and then make people read them, and I just feel like we should mull this over, and if people have more pros and cons, like we have our own little subcommittee over here, you could send them to one of us and then we'll put them on, because we don't want to have a document that's working with the whole group, because then it becomes a quorum. So if you go through this in the next week or so, week and a half, and you say, I think there's another pro, another con, then we can add it in, because we'll keep working on this
I feel like that's a
document.
work in progress.
It is,
We'll
we'll
keep
keep
coming
working
up
on
with
that.
things.
Another thing in your packet, and this, Karen came up with this, but it was based on Sabrina's suggestion, and I'm reconsidering my survey, being strong-armed, that maybe we do put out a 1-question, 2-question survey. Do you want to stay or withdraw from SAU55, and provide feedback and input to the committee?
I was so impressed with TPAF's 1-question survey
Yeah, this is what
that
came
I'm
out
like,
of that one
we could do
question
that. I think that there's so much emotional energy in this that I think in order, if we choose to withdraw and we put the warrant on, that we need to get people's buy-in, and the best way to get people's buy-in is to get their feedback and their input first. So that's why I was thinking.
So I think this is gonna have to go to the school board, because this would have to come out, I think, from the school board, not from us, I think.
Should we provide some informational things that we can point out before they decide to vote, for those people who actually
I don't think we should
research?
do that, since we're in the very beginning of the process. I mean, that kind of speaks to my, last week felt like yesterday, wanting to put some of this information out for the public to digest. If we are selective, and we have to be selective in what information goes out there, prior to us completing our work at, meeting number 2 right here, I'm not certain we're not creating more chaos for ourselves than.
I think when we spoke about this, we talked about, all these people that voted originally at the polls for us to even be sitting here.
To
What were
research it,
their
right.
reasons for it? Instead of giving them more information, and then the numbers are gonna be
input.
different from what their original opinion
Yes.
was
So
based
the
on
vote was to
what it
research,
was.
right?
Right.
And to do our due diligence and see whether this makes sense or not. Putting out a question like this at meeting number 2, it's pretty much saying, we don't care, we don't have the information yet, but what do you think? What's your gut
So
I don't know,
you're
that's-
against putting this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I should just said that. I should just said that, sorry. Didn't see the time.
Bring that out too.
Okay.
I think right now you're gonna get more emotional responses than
All right,
informational
well, let's hold
responses.
this then. Everybody in agreement?
And the issue that I have with surveys, I think you had pointed out when I watched the meeting, was how do you lock it down to just the residents of the district? How do you, then you have to stop multiple takes of the, of it. How do you,
Okay.
so I've seen surveys go out in the district, not through the district, but, that people have put together. And you can go in and vote multiple times,
Yeah,
different
yeah.
ways, and there's nothing that
All right.
stops it.
Yeah.
So
It's
it's
not a
skewed
validated
data.
instrument.
And I
Yeah,
used to
that
want
was my concern.
to go back
Hammer
to
for like
that, we have public comment every
Yeah.
meeting.
Yes.
So if people want to come and weigh in on, how they're feeling, whether emotionally about it or, after they go in and look at some of this information we have, there's opportunity to comment on that.
Yeah. And if people want to reach out to their individual reps, I think our information is out there if they don't want to come in and be public. If somebody comes in and gives me their reasons, I can just bring it forward without naming names, and they can still remain anonymous to the public if they want.
And we do have our contact information posted, Mrs. Belcher?
We do not.
Oh, we don't?
No, we don't have your contact information. We never discussed, we got it all for you guys. You all had made a decision to, some of you had changed and have specific non-private ones, but not unless the committee has a directive where you want that information out
Is
there.
everybody okay with their contact information being posted?
Mine's already
Email,
out
not
there.
cell phone.
Mine's too. What?
Email, not
Just
cell
email?
phone.
Just
Emails.
emails, just emails, yeah, not cell phones.
Yeah.
Please.
mean, if we need to further, we can continue to email back and forth and then decide to get a phone, but there's no need for my cell phone to be out there.
Okay, good idea.
Good point.
Okay,
I'm just gonna call you.
all right. Now,
On the veterans though, you may want to consider a specific email that's different
yes,
than
we
your
talked about
personal.
that last
Okay.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah,
people
that was
set
great
up new
advice. Thank
emails.
you.
Just- yeah.
I will take that up under advisement. Please don't
Okay.
put it out there yet.
I will not put yours out there.
I have
Mark
5
loves keeping
emails.
these out.
All right.
So on the SharePoint that you made for us, where it has our names, then when people click on that, it'll just bring up our email address. Is that right?
I could,
Or it'll be posted there. I mean, I guess that's what I'm
we'll
asking
figure out
for.
the best way that makes it the easiest for a person to click on your name and get your email. We'll figure that out.
Oh, you're clearly the expert. You've been doing this, so yeah, okay. I'm okay either way. I was just curious.
We'll figure out the best way to do it.
All right. Okay, so that was our subcommittee. Sorry, I spoke for our sub.
No, you did a great job.
So, I don't know, Karen or Mark, I know I know documents are in here from Karen, and then I know Mark, and Sabrina had documents in here too, and my packet's so messed up.
This has got to be Karen.
We'll get the big one. Can
You know what I should have done is I should. That's all of the schools that. That was my bad. So, no, the way I operate is
least
I
I just
had
sent the
many
links.
tabs in this Excel workbook, and I should have just taken up the one tab that did not mean to kill a few branches of a tree. I apologize. But now that you have it, it is all summarized information from the DOE. I had to pull about 5 different spreadsheets and summarized it all together. So it should have all the different schools, the districts, the SAU, and so there's a lot of information. And then you can see that obviously if it's a district piece of information, it's duplicated in the SAU, et cetera. So, and then I just put also the average teacher salary, and then I've just got the super salary, and then the very last column just shows the ratio of the super salary to the average teacher salary. And then you can see the number of students, and that is the number, let me double check. It is the number of students per the SAU. Nope, it is the number of students for the district. I might have to go back and double check.
And this is for
No, it's for the district.
for which year?
I believe it's 2016, 2017 is all of the stuff that I had from DOE. That was the most recent that was on the DOE. I know you said that you had counted more SAUs. I think this one only has 100 because that's all there were in 2016,
Oh, I didn't bring
2017.
those notes, but
Well,
yeah,
we
I think
broke
it's
it
like
down.
103.
The attached links that we put on here, we broke it down to 6 of the regional
The
schools.
6 that we had talked
And we
about.
just attached the links, we didn't,
So our tree is this big.
I will learn.
so, but we just talked, the ones that we had talked about in the group, we kind of did the same exact thing, broke it down by the salaries per teacher, the students, and, you know, their report cards and everything, and just did the links, so that breaks it down on those links for the 6 that we had spoken about.
These
looks like
6
there's-
that you did, were these comparative in size as far as students?
For the most part, yeah, we were asked to look at that. These were the ones that we had discussed last week. So with the exception, I think, of
Interlinks
Interlakes,
is
which is
small.
smaller, I don't
That
know why
was on
that
the
one
list,
got,
yeah.
yeah, I don't know why
I
that
think
one.
that's because one of the regionals.
Always it was a regional, and that's why it made the list. But the others are comparable in size. In the links there also, we were asked to look at, you know, some of the achievement scores as well. You know, the DOE is kind enough to provide that.
I do have I've enhanced my spreadsheet by putting in what we got from US News, but I did not bother to send that out. So I will consolidate and get all of that.
Okay. And then you also have this document that we talked about earlier, that now we have the rest of the data for this.
Well, it
salary.
doesn't match.
Oh,
It doesn't match. So I went through because the data I was pulling, so here's a good example. The 2012, 2013 data, it says the total salary here is, you know, 716,487. But when I look at the actuals for 2012, 2013 from the 2015 budget, right? So if I look at the 2015 budget, it tells me what was budgeted 2012, 2013, what the actuals were 2012, 2013, budgeted 2013, 2014, and projected 2014, 2015. So I'm only ever looking at the actuals. And so a lot of the data from what you sent out it doesn't match the actuals, the bottom line numbers, so I haven't updated everything yet. But ballpark, it's close. But also, yeah, but if I can get into specifics, I only obviously got your stuff just a couple hours before the meeting, so I haven't had a chance to compare everything, but,
So you can either, I don't know, update or send discrepancies, and maybe we can figure this out, because your numbers are coming from,
I went through every deliberative session and found the SAU budget that was presented.
okay,
That's a laugh and admiration. I'm not laughing at you.
I'm impressed.
I am a little.
That is dedication. So this packet that we have of the salaries that you had, I think it was you, Karen, who had requested 2009 through current. I'm looking at the page, for example, that says 2012, 2013. I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. And that amount says 716,487 is the total.
Correct, but in the actuals, in the 2015 budget, said it was 750,209.
So on this one, though, there is a prorated amount for a couple of the positions, and I'm wondering if that might be the discrepancy there.
That's 35,000 different, so,
Well, the superintendent is amount prorated, and administrative assistant for business has an asterisk as
When
amount
the
prorated.
Superintendent left, I believe you had a payout, when he left, and then I started.
So I'm wondering if that might be part of that, just
I
difference.
think
might
the other
be
thing,
because
if
they
you're
were
looking
paying
at the budget, it doesn't necessarily mean those salaries are gonna line up, because it gets approved, and then there was been like the salaries get adjusted in June.
I'm only looking at the actuals. It's on the budget. You know how column number 2 says the actuals for the prior year?
Yeah, those should be
Assumed
accurate, but that
actuals were-
2012-13, I think that number,
Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking at,
oh, you-
I was looking at this.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to
She's
compare,
comparing.
right?
Yeah, and
I'm
it
trying to
doesn't-
take the actuals. Now, it used to be that the salaries, it had a lot more lines, everything was broken out, but since 2011, 2012, that's not available, it's just a one-line item for salaries. So in this 2015 budget, there's a whole column there that says this is the actual spent for 2012, 2013. And those actuals in these documents, and I've pulled every one,
Maybe Jeff-
don't match what,
Maybe
Jeff-
Jeff can answer, I can't, I don't
I
know the
got
answer.
that out.
Sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to.
Did you follow that
You're so
question?
serious, like, but
Well, you were upstairs,
Her data
I
does
can,
not match,
he was upstairs watching, he wanted you to come down here and ask him that question.
does not match. Your
I can also summarize the discrepancies, instead of going down
two
a
reports,
rabbit hole
one
now,
she generated and one.
and then send them out if you prefer.
So I'm not gonna post it until we get the okay. I'm assuming that do not post
Please,
order is still in place, right?
please, yeah.
So
Yeah.
Karen's pulling the actuals from what the actual posted budgets are from the deliberative sessions, or the actuals,
Correct.
and they're not matching up with what you just handed us, right?
That is
what you're
correct.
saying?
And even some of the individual salaries, so if I want to go to 2013, 2014, well, actually, some of those, they just don't match the DOE. So what's on the DOE is not matching. Let's see, on 2014, 2015, the actuals from the budget says that it was 840,882 were the total for salaries, but in 2014, 2015, on this, with the green headers, it says 818. So again, another difference of like, 22,000. So it was just confusing why these didn't match up with the actuals.
Do
You give
do
him
you
some
know
time
what?
to research it, or unless he knows the answer now.
I'll tell you what some of them may be off, right about 22,000. We do have a couple variables in there. One of them is, and I'm not sure if you're just looking at the administration, meaning the superintendent, assistant superintendent, BA, ABA, and that sort of thing, but in some cases, we do have additional extra hours for our hourly staff who do work, so that may not be included if we looked at what their salary is. We're not looking at what their total compensation is. We do have a pool for extra hours every year. In some cases, someone may have left prior to us accounting, which I think we only started doing in 16, 17. On the other employee benefits line, if someone separated, it's entirely possible that their numbers are way over what would have been reported for a salary, because that would have been included as part of their compensation if they had a retirement incentive or a buyout or they left and redeemed some sick time. So there will be some, I don't want to say some inconsistencies, but the numbers are not going to be apples to apples when we're looking at what the actual salaries are versus what we either actually paid or what we actually budgeted. In some years, we have a partial year perhaps for some staff. We may have where they perhaps didn't get, full compensation, or we didn't report full compensation. If you have a couple very, very specific, and I've heard a lot of references, but if you had one or two that you could.
Here's the 2015, 2016 salaries. So
Okay.
from the item with the green headers.
Yep.
It says 860,283.
Yep.
But the actuals are, for salaries, are 923,565.
Well,
So that's a difference of 63,000.
I think just speaking from an SAU budget, having gone through SAU budgets, and maybe this one has, I understand what Jeff's saying, but do you have one of those documents, like from?
Does this include bonuses and anything else
Right.
other than salary
There's
payout?
usually some,
That might be the merit pool that you're missing from the actuals.
exactly.
So that's all the raises for everybody, that's not just one person.
Okay, so the actuals under salaries is actually not just salaries.
Right.
Yeah, there'd be
It's
a.
complete compensation.
Yeah, it would
possibly.
include
Yes.
it would include
Yeah.
what was drawn from the merit pool and put into that, into those categories for actuals.
I mean, it
That
includes-
makes sense based on the dollar amounts you're talking about, I think that.
Yeah, this one is consistently larger than
It
what
is, and,
okay.
and when we look at the SAU budget, and I don't know as I have one here, we see the salaries, and then we see, there's another line, I probably have it,
I know I had it last
you know what I
week.
mean?
Yeah, I saw
You
it.
took a picture of it last time, because you were looking at those salaries, you'll see the salaries, and then there's other
Yeah.
merit pool
I would
and stuff underneath that, that's the discrepancy.
I would say
between
had that
from a
those two.
calculator standpoint, if you take the actuals and multiply it times 1.03, you'll probably get to that number. It's about 3% higher than what the actuals were.
Okay.
Because the merit pool is about 3% annually, or it has been
Okay.
historically. the last
That explains.
Yeah, and I believe the schedule is where they would end up on that, this schedule.
100,000.
Yeah, so that's why,
I can
again,
show.
the orange was the budgeted, and I was trying to erase out the orange and put in real actual numbers, and that's why I was trying to put this in, and it wasn't matching, and so I was,
So is it in the 20,000s, just about? The difference?
well, this
3%
last one
range?
was about 60,000, right?
Yeah,
The
you-
2015, 2016, it was 860 versus 924. Let's see, 2016, 2017, the actuals was 1.05 million, but it's 955.
If you had
Yeah.
if you had a top administrator leave and they had, post-employment benefits would drive that number up too. So I think in those years, I think our business administrator left in one of those years, another year, the assistant superintendent left. So that may,
I mean,
I think I could show you where that, from an SAU budget, because Jen had them. I'll show you where that's on a different budget line, so you can see it.
on an up note, to at least to try and match up where we were per salary budget, when we do pay out those other employee benefits in the event of a separation, retirement benefits, sick time, buyout, whatever it is, historically, those had been charged to the salary line. And I've since been able to work with audit and say, look, I have the money in the budget so that it's there. Net, we're not maybe over budget overall. But it would be nice to be able to look at the salary line, right, and know that that salary line is in line with what had been budgeted. So we've since at least moved those expenses to that other employee benefits line so that you can separate it.
So prior budgets, before you started reporting just one line item for salaries, showed, of course, the salaries, but then it also did show the compensation pool. And to me, that was helpful, to be able to see salary versus bonus money versus et cetera.
Extra hours or whatever,
Yeah.
yeah.
So just having a one line item for salaries when I'm trying to break it down isn't as helpful.
Hopefully this will be helpful, and this represents those salaries.
Well,
paid.
no, but I think what Karen's asking is not just for those salaries. She's asking for what we see at the SAU, and that's that Jen had these documents. So we have just the salaries, is what Jeff gave us, but underneath that, for 1920, there's a merit pool of 31,000, extra hours of $18,000, contract incentives, service recognition, and stipend. And that's where that discrepancy is between what you're seeing and what he's showing as salaries, because you're not seeing this bottom block that can add up $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000.
Correct.
So, so what Karen's looking for in addition to what you just had is the block on the bottom.
Yeah.
Because that will make those two numbers match.
That'll be helpful
Yeah.
as we're, if we decide to withdraw, as we're putting together a future plan. That kind of information is valuable to have that breakdown.
And you're also doing this, just in case people wonder why you're looking at trends over time.
Correct.
Which gets to be important when you're looking at something and doing something on your own so, okay.
And I will note, though, that seeing that merit pool there as part of or looking for that as part of the budget, because the screen is, I believe, what we paid out, or what the salaries would have, not what we paid out, but what the salaries would have been. So when you're looking at that merit pool, you're looking at it from a budgetary perspective, because all the salaries plus the merit pool theoretically would equal what we see for what we actually paid out. So if I added the merit pool to the bottom of this, it might help, I guess. It wouldn't be double counting.
Because she wants
All
to
the things
see.
that you just said.
Then it would probably match what.
So Kim just said.
That would, then it would all add up in my spreadsheet,
Yeah, but I just want to
right?
make
But
clear,
you
I
had,
want to make clear what would be showing, that's all.
you had different kinds, right? There was also comp time, again, which that still just surprises me that comp time is paid out. But I'd like to be able to see that, the comp time, the other amount of money that goes to each of the employees, because then as we're developing our own SAU, we're gonna need to know that, for our projections.
Got it. Okay. So we can get that done. We'll write that down as an action. Okay, so Karen, did we go over all your,
What you asked for.
wait. Didn't we have, okay. I just want to make sure we went over everything in the packet, except. Oh, no, there's one more spreadsheet that Karen, you had put together salaries. It's got yellow on the top.
Yeah, it was also interesting because of the 100 SAUs I looked at, only 40 of them. Okay, I looked at all the SAUs for 2015, 2016, 2017. That not everybody has an assistant superintendent. Some actually have two assistant superintendents, and that goes to what you were saying last week, Kim, was that, when they are a one SAU, one district, that the distribution of effort is going out. So, yeah, again, that's just a summary of all the data from the DOE website. And then I just, took the top 3 executives, the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, and the business administrator, added them up together, and then sorted all the 100 and SAU55 is number 1.
No, wait, but you took the top 3 salaries, and then you've got 2 columns on the right, though. So you have the super and 1 assistant,
Correct,
and then you have the super and,
because that was the most common.
and then you have the last column reflects the super, 1 assistant, and a business administrator.
Correct.
And then you've sorted these
By the very last column.
by the very last column, which is the cost.
Correct.
I'm sorry, can you, that last column, super plus assistant 1, ER plus assistant 1 plus,
So,
is that
so this-
basically
That's
all
two.
those guys?
Don't even
No,
have
no,
my
no,
own
no,
sheet
no,
here. I've got
no,
my own
it's-
printout, but
I think what she's doing is, the second to the last column represents the 2 highest paid people within an SAU. And the last column
it got
is
cut off.
the
That's why
last.
you're not seeing.
The ER is supposed to be part of super in that last
Okay.
far right column.
Yeah.
And then, I'm sorry, so the far right column is what?
Super plus 1 assistant
Plus
and
business.
the business administrator.
Yeah,
3
so
positions.
3 positions.
So-
3 positions, correct. The column on the far right is 3 positions,
Column next to that is 2 positions.
and just the super and assistant super.
Gotcha. Okay.
But that's not always populated, so I put was there, and there's only I think 1 or 2 instances where there is a 3rd assistant super.
I think it's important too, when you're looking at these numbers, that you're looking at the size of
Yeah,
the
the
schools in
number of
it.
students.
Because if you just made a comment that, here we are up at the top, right? But if you look at the one like Oyster River right underneath, right? They're 167,908. I'm just going on your first number, right? Their enrollment's 2157. So we have to, when you're looking at these numbers, you have to look at the size too of what we have for students.
Well, true, but you also have to look at, you can sort it a variety of ways. Timberlane, I think, is our SAU is the 10th largest in the state, is that correct?
There aren't too many 5,000 student SAUs.
Okay. So, anyway, it's just.
Have that
it's-
somewhere.
It's
Yeah,
Nashua, and then Manchester, and then
Gone out on their own, they're single districts.
Well,
Exeter.
you know, it'd be interesting, Karen, to add a column here.
Because we need to. Do we have bigger paper?
Well, for enrollment, because then you could sort,
I got that. See, all I have to do is do a VLOOKUP. I'm there.
I just had them open. I just got it.
well, then you can just, then,
Yeah.
to Sabrina's question, let's
And
sort
I've
it
also,
by.
I've actually already done that. And
Like
I've
I have the
also,
enrollment.
and I've also added a column for, yes, I scrolled through all of those. They only ranked the first 80 schools or whatever.
We don't need
60.
more than,
Yeah.
60's fine.
Yeah. Because sadly, we were, middle of the road? We were
This goes up
number,
to 100. I know you
we were
wrote that
number
number.
40. Love 100.
This goes up to 100 right here on that. This is from the DOE too.
First go to 11.
This is this has the state, each district, the district number, and then it breaks down their enrollment by preschool, kindergarten, elementary, middle, high school, and then their total.
Yeah, that's
And
one
that's
of
off the
spreadsheets I
DOE.
pulled in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see, though, how many of those are single district SAUs. I mean,
Yep.
because when you talk about 5,000 student SAU, that's not single district, though, that's two. So how would, if we were to go single district, where's our comparison?
Yep.
Yeah, because that speaks to
Salem's
cost
rather
cost
close to
savings.
us in,
Yeah, Salem is
Salem's rather close to us in numbers as a
Salem,
single.
Merrimack, Dover.
So we'd be down to like 3,700 students roughly for Timberlane alone.
32, 33.
34, 6.
Okay, so I think I touched on everything that's in, and Kathy, I think I didn't send this, right?
I did.
Did I? Oh, you
Yes.
sent it.
Everything between 3,000
Okay.
and 4,000.
So this
That's
is,
what we're looking for.
we also
And
have
they're
in
within
here
that.
the original
Timberlane,
Timberlane
I think that's what you're looking for.
the packet. they gave
Planning
to the
Board,
voters. Yeah.
which put our district together as a good piece of historical information with pictures, too. So this is something else that the committee might want to take a look at before the next meeting.
But this didn't have, like, the this slid into the already existing SAU
Right.
that was married by the state.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So that's something you can
And
take a
this
look.
was in 1964, so this is before Newton and Salem left.
No, Salem left shortly after the SAU 55 was created.
No, SAU 55 was created in 1919.
But Salem's SAU 57.
Salem was originally.
So they left us fairly soon
Yeah, some
after.
was,
I thought it was
Salem left in-
1967.
you
Well,
put
I got
67.
that
You have
from,
the actual
so
date?
67 I got from Facebook, so that one
oh, okay, well.
was
then
suspect.
it's Suspect, okay. All right. So, before we wrap it up then, so everybody has documents that you're going to want to peruse here, and we're going to continue to work on our documents, Karen on her spreadsheet and us on our pros and cons, and I think anybody can work on that, because we need to move forward rather quickly here, based on our timeline, as to what, I would hope by the end of the next meeting, after further discussion, that we're looking at whether or not we're gonna move forward with trying to develop a plan or not, or we're gonna say it's not feasible. I don't know if that's reasonable for us to be looking at yet, or what other is there other information other than what we're gonna digest here that we need before we really start to think, are we, where we're at?
Maybe at the end of the next meeting, carving out some time to help redefine what feasibility means to us.
And
Well,
what
maybe-
additional information we might want to see before we make a decision?
Well, in terms of feasibility, I think we need to carve that out now. Because if I'm looking at this over the next 2 weeks, I wanna know, so what does feasibility mean to you?
So just about anything's feasible, right? I mean, I could build a sandcastle 20-foot tall with a spoon. Doesn't mean that's advisable. So that, I mean, that's one of the things that not to be, you know, funny here, but is it advisable? Does it make sense for us? So my rubber, you know, meets the road analogy, that still for the most part holds true for me. That's one of my prime directives. Other people obviously have different thoughts. I mean, what are the implications that you are looking for to make it? I think that's something that we have to come to some sort of consensus as a group.
Well, I think part of the reason I think we went to a pros and cons is when I look at feasibility, I look at whether or not there are more pros than cons. One of the things I was hoping to get a better idea of was how the SAU staff is broken out right now,
Yeah.
and what I might be able to envision as Timberlane's SAU staff based on what the current staff is. I can't get any sense of that. So I don't think we're gonna be able to get any sense of that based
And
on
the
the
difference is
conversation.
staff as far as what they're able to provide to this potentially new SAU, or the potential savings we could derive
Potential
from that?
savings,
Okay.
and, I mean, there are a couple of things. There's, as I said before, I think you've gotta look, is there savings by having a single district SAU? Is Hampstead really, I don't mean this to come across the wrong way, is 23% really all that Hampstead's getting from this SAU, or
Is it equitable?
Or are
Is
we
it equitable?
subsidizing Hampstead?
Are we subsidizing Hampstead? Yeah, you're right. Are we subsidizing Hampstead? And also because if you look at the document that looks at the two strategic plans and the differences, it's, and the pros that most districts have reported is the local control of their own district. So I think those, in terms of feasibility, it's looking at, is it feasible in terms of the education for our students, which I can't really see an impact negatively or positively, other than there's not a split in the SAU staff. Is it feasible in terms of cost or staffing? That's a question mark, and I don't think we're gonna be able to answer that completely. There's certainly economies for some things, but could we manage more effectively a staff of our own, and could you scale back some? And is Hampstead getting more benefit? And we do have the extra layer of the SAU, and if you read some of the historical documents, when the SAUs were formed, they were actually giving services to the districts. Special ed was underneath them, typically, transportation, those sorts of things. But now you can see a lot of those services have been the district, and I think that's why you're seeing sole SAUs, and I'm gonna be quiet now, so. Go ahead.
No,
Karen.
you were just starting to go into what I wanted to talk about, and some of that is at the end of that pros and cons list. When you look back about, you know, the history of the SAUs, and that the superintendent used to be a state employee, and the state required that SAUs had a superintendent and an assistant superintendent or a business administrator or business agent, I think they called them. And what was happening, it didn't matter the size of your district, you had to have those positions. And so it was, smaller districts were feeling overburdened, like, why do we have to have those same positions as a larger district? And going into a single district SAU, and I think why we've seen so much break off over the years since that, the revision in the mid-90s, it really gives districts the autonomy to define how they want their administrative services run. So the state still says you have to provide these services, but now these districts have the autonomy to define how they're going to do that and what that's going to look like on their own, independent of having another district or two or three or four weigh in on, what they think it should look like.
Have there been instances in the past, I'll just say 2 years, where, in reading some of the pros here, local control of SAU, where Timberlane as an entity and Hampstead as an entity in voting, came at a situation from different perspectives, and the vote was swayed one way or the other because Hampstead tended to go this way, Timberlane wanted to go this way as their representatives. So has that been a problem? So, I mean, we know that weighted voting helped to address some of those perceived and perhaps real inadequacies, but how many times has that actually come? So we're talking about having more control and local control. How many times in the past 2 years do we know that a vote has occurred where we, Timberlane, were stymied and did not get our way on any particular issue? And I don't care what the issue
I
is.
feel like the pendulum is swinging, because when you look back.
Has it happened? I mean,
But
in
when
the
you
past
look
couple of
back-
years, do we know?
But when you look back further, in all the documents that I've read, Hampstead was feeling as though Timberlane, like they had no say. Timberlane had 9 votes, didn't matter what it was, Timberlane was gonna outvote Hampstead on everything. And I think that's part of, I'm guessing, what drove their withdrawal back. I don't remember what year it was. The past 2 years.
There was one in 2016.
That was Hampstead's. That was Hampstead's, yeah.
They voted against it.
Yes.
And they vote.
The
Which is,
past 2, I mean, even the past year was difficult. I feel like we didn't meet.
well, we didn't meet. We couldn't get meetings. So, 1, we couldn't get meetings. 2, Hampstead took us to court. 3, they publicly stated a resolution against our board. 4, we are still, the weighted voting, though somewhat settled, is still, when you talk about the inequities, it's clear that Hampstead obviously we are providing some services as they go to Pinkerton, but those Pinkerton students,
When you're saying we're providing some services.
well, like transportation, okay, so, but when we move to weighted voting, even though Hampstead doesn't, quote, pay for anything for those high school students, we're including those as part of the weighted voting. So that's another area that's
Feels inequitable.
inequitable, thank you. So I could certainly say that there are, back to your question about the boards, it's clear in the last year or two, at least, that I've been on there, that from a budgetary point of view, the Timberlane reps, for the most part, have wanted to hold that budget down, where the Hampstead people, I mean, go back and watch SAU meetings if you want the answer to the question, and I think you're gonna find.
Yeah, in watching
There has
them,
been.
it doesn't seem as if the Timberlane board was ever stymied, and again, I haven't watched all of them, was stymied in its efforts to hold the line. I think that may have been the phrase you used. So I want to distinguish between a perceived problem and a real problem. Maybe it is a real problem, maybe it's perceived, I don't know, but I think there needs to be some clarification on that.
Well, how do you wanna get the clarification on that?
In the past 3 years, 4 years, have there been votes, be they budgetary or other, where Timberlane has wanted to go east, Hampstead has wanted to go west, and we've gone west or north?
So you're saying
rather-
that they voted along party lines? or
Not
district
necessarily,
lines?
but against the interest of Timberlane, or their Timberlane's representatives.
And specifically looking for a topic where that happened.
Yeah,
And
how
I
frequently
think
does
it's
it happen?
interesting
Has it
if
happened?
Timberlane's always voting the opposite of Hampstead, or Hampstead always voting the opposite of Timberlane. That is indicative of an issue.
Question, if you want to answer.
Yeah.
The answer is never. Timberlane has always had more votes. You may have difference of opinions amongst Timberlane, but when Timberlane wants something, they have 9 votes. It's pretty, so, Hampstead never controlled the direction. They couldn't without
Right.
Timberlane votes. It was impossible.
Well, if Timberlane votes as a 9-member block, which, again, you've got 4 towns making up Timberlane. I've sat in more than one Timberlane board meeting and had it be told to our board that Hampstead will not entertain you in an SAU meeting. And so that means in order for us to hold an SAU meeting as an SAU, I need 8 out of 9
8 out of 9.
Timberlane board members. I don't think that's right. And we sat here for at least, I can mention 3 meetings where the superintendent said, Hampstead will not entertain a board meeting. So unless you get 8 people out of 9, which to me seems a little inequitable, you're not gonna have that SAU meeting.
I think we've had the issue come up, we have that vacant SAU position that's kind of been batted around back and forth. Before I was on the board, we have the issue of, like, we talked about the facilities director.
Yeah.
That I believe went back and forth a little bit. The issues with the audit and the support and Timberlane versus Hampstead versus where's the problem. So I think there have been
So part of-
issues that if we were one district, it could be resolved pretty quickly amongst the Timberlane board.
So that's, okay, so that is where the rubber meets the road for you then. That's one of the impetus for looking into this for you.
One of them, yeah.
Okay.
So, my concern is if you read some of the withdrawals that went through, and some of their reasoning is, they found that their boards just could no longer work together. And we're seeing the boards, struggle right now. And can we get back to a place where we both feel like we're amicable and we can get things done at the SAU level? So that's an area, it's an unknown. Can we get back to that point? Are we all already on our own way to separation with it at the board level? So there are things, a simple thing, getting the SAU meeting live streamed. It would benefit both, but there were Timberlane people that felt it disenfranchised Hampstead. So it was voted against, even though it would benefit both in the long run, because those meetings could be viewed live, they could be looked at, and it would be open transparency. Even though there's a lot of room for people, I mean, this is typically how many people come to budget meetings. Well, actually, this is more than budget meetings. But at the SU level, you have about the same. So I think that, that vote, it took a long time to have that until just this past year. We had the capability to do it. It just was something that could just not get moved forward. That benefited Timberlane. I don't think it would have been an issue if we were a single district SAU. That would have been happening right along, because it didn't disenfranchise anybody. So we do have people that are on the Timberlane side that are looking at how does this affect Hampstead if we do it, because it's a board vote. They're not really looking at, does it benefit my district completely?
Right.
So those are some areas that there's contention with it, and it's a small thing, but it really just it brought to light one of those areas where if it was a single district, that wouldn't have been an issue. But I do have some reservations about the boards working together right now. And I think that piece really should be considered, because we do have to, if we don't separate, we have to figure out how to fix that.
Well, you're right, and going back to the boards not even working together is that, or even when Timberlane was requesting a meeting of the SAU, as a board, we could not get an SAU meeting.
I think the other thing for me that comes up from time to time is thinking about the SAU employees who are working for 3 separate entities. And I look at the size of Timberlane as a district, and we're a pretty big district on our own. And there's a lot of work to be done. And I would love to have employees 100% of the time solely focused on Timberlane. And I do believe that would be in the best interest for the students, for the employees, the taxpayers, to have 100% of the time focused on Timberlane.
So is there any other information that we would like from the SAU for next time? Does anybody, if you have anything? I know Sabrina was gonna take a look at the audits, savings for the audits.
Ron, you're smirking over there.
What?
I don't know, he looks like he's got a list.
So I think what I'd like people to do is add on to the send to Jen or Barbara, not me, the information that speaks to the withdrawal. And Mark, certainly if you want to go through and, I don't know, look at SAU votes, or
Okay,
you were,
sounds good.
you might be a little more objective than me, because
Oh, come now.
And I don't like to watch myself on TV. I never look at myself. I don't want to look. But I think, when
We've lived it once.
I've lived it once, I don't need to relive it. So, looking at the timeline, unless the other, Mark's raised his objections, unless the other people have objections, I think at the next meeting, which is the auspicious May 13th meeting.
May 15th. Week of the 13th. It's
Oh, I
Wednesday,
see.
the 15th.
Okay, got it. May 15th. That by the end of that meeting, we should have a discussion and come to a vote. Even if we decide to move forward with a withdrawal plan, that doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to withdraw. But we should make a decision as to whether we're going to move forward, because we don't have that much time to start
Well, that's,
to pull things together. Is it
that's
any-
8 days,
What?
so in a week, right?
Yeah.
It's a week.
Oh, it's a week.
It's not 2 weeks.
It's not- oh, it's not.
So
So we gotta
That's right.
digest all this.
Well, I mean, I'm not hard and fast set on that, but it would be nice to know,
Get an initial,
well, if everybody's gonna say no, then we're done.
we get the summer off.
We get the summer off, but if people are gonna say yes, or maybe yes, I think if you're yes or maybe yes, then we have to go forward with the plan. If you're absolutely no, then obviously you don't, but I can't say for certain that I'm going to be an absolute yes. I don't think I could be until I start to really dig more and start to develop a plan, actually. Because the staffing is really gonna be a big factor in terms of the financial impact, which, for the voters is usually the big issue.
Yeah, and
You picked a series of dates, and some of those dates are gonna be very difficult for me. So if there are specific times when you need me, I'll do my best. But I know I can't make all those dates. In May and June is just crazy. I get booked out months in advance at night, so. But if there are specific things, I'll do my best. I'll come from wherever I am or
Well,
whatever.
I think we really hit on a lot last time as to, you pulled together an enormous amount of information that we needed as a committee. I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now that would require the superintendent. Maybe we'll have a better idea if somebody.
So we're looking at the 15th next time?
looking
May
at the
15th is Wednesday, yep.
Which is
yeah.
a Wednesday?
Yeah.
Wednesday. And like the other request is, like, I'll talk to the Hampstead chair about how much they want to share at this point about their plans. They're reorganizing, so I don't have something for you, but I'll ask them again. At some point, I know you're trying to consider what their impact is. They're taking care of their own impact. They're planning their own, they're making their own feasible plan,
Yep.
in the event that you withdraw, which you would do the same if they were leaving. You'd be thinking about, how does this impact Timberlane? So they're looking at their own impact, and at what point they have public documents or documents to share, I'll ask for them.
Well,
I think if you look at some of the withdrawal studies, that piece of it is really quite small. It doesn't need
Yeah.
to be an in-depth analysis like what we would do for our own district. More, what are the options for this other district if we leave them? And just lay them out there, because it's not really for us to decide, it's for them to decide, but just to be able to say, there are these options
right.
out there.
Yeah, if they
So-
give me an absolute statement to make to you, I know they'll be fine. We talk about impact, but if they say, go back to the committee and tell them there's no impact on us, that's why I said I'll take it under advisement. If they want me to come back with that, I'll come back with that.
Yeah.
Well,
They're all-
then you've also said there's gonna be cost savings for them.
They have different options because they're reorganizing.
But
that can save.
you've publicly said that there could be cost savings.
That's right, could be and will be are two different statements.
Well,
I said they could
okay.
be. It's decisions they have to make they haven't made yet, Kim.
Well-
So please don't put words in my mouth, please, please
no,
don't.
I'm not. You
You
said-
are. I
yeah.
said there could be. I didn't say there would be. I said there could be cost savings of decisions that they make.
I will go back and listen to that tape.
I said it will not cost more, is what I said, quote unquote.
I think that if they come back and let us know that that would satisfy that piece.
Yeah.
If they came back and they said, we will, be fiscally fine, educationally fine, if the withdrawal goes forward, if they, we just need to satisfy, like you said, that little statement.
piece.
They'll
And How
either
do we
yeah.
determine that?
They'll either officially tell me to tell you that, or they'll tell you that themselves.
Yeah.
Either way, it's the same message.
Yep, as long as we get that from them, because we need to make sure that, when we leave, that they're still able to, not be largely impacted, or at least be able to determine if they will.
So the one action item that we'll need from the SAU is the pro forma budget for should we withdraw in 2020, 2021? And should we withdraw in 2021, 2022?
Are you just looking for columns, or are you looking
Yes,
for?
please.
Yeah.
Columns, yeah.
So not two separate, just.
No, just
create that-
more
just
columns on the
columns.
one we
Yeah,
already
so
have.
option one, you have a withdraw this year, option two, withdraw a year later, option three, withdraw a year later, et cetera. That way we can understand the contractual obligations and how those
Pretty simple to
decrease.
pull together, yeah.
Yeah, I think in relative terms, one thing that I have done is included the salaries as they are, and I can just roll those forward, and I think you may want to get an idea as to when some of those expenses are going to be going away. That assumes or presupposes that, for example, there are no layoffs, things like that. So none of that stuff is factored into any of these budgets in terms of unemployment compensation or anything like that, because the idea was that there's no impact on jobs. So it's not 100% perfect, but I can make those changes and get them circulated.
And with the assumption that those ones that expire in 21, if we say 22, the ones that expire in 21 aren't extended beyond that, that it's a one-year extension on those so that we don't, because they expire the year before, the superintendent's contract expires, so, and the lease as well. So if they're extended before the, so if a contract
just assume
expires in
no
21,
extensions.
we only
Yes,
extend it
assume
for
no
one.
extensions on
Right.
contracts.
Right.
So they're set to auto-renew now, and you're just going to make sure they don't auto-renew.
Well, I don't think they auto-renew. Right?
Yes, they do.
Do they?
Yes,
Oh,
they
okay,
do.
that's right.
That'll be discussed at the SAU meeting.
Okay. So that just has to be a piece, so we know that there's a line that
Yes,
we don't,
yeah,
we're not contractually obligated beyond that 22.
right. And then I really would like to see in terms of, and these are minor amounts anyway, but, when you put loss of rental income in the pro forma budget as 42,000, I really think that should be reflected as 23% of that number. What, as,
Can we remove the pro forma budget from the website as it is now, just because it does introduce so much confusion? Because it's on the public website, right? It was posted
It
April
is.
15th.
yeah. I'm for that.
I make a motion that we remove the pro forma budget from the public website.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Can we just tell me who did what? From the site?
Wait, discussion.
You guys, please.
Karen made the motion to remove the pro forma budget from the public website.
Yeah, seconded by
Albert
Barbara.
seconded.
Thank you.
So
Jen's
just
discussing.
until we revisit it with these adjustments that we talked about tonight, and then look at putting it up.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
So we'll be posting a lot of other stuff, but we need to review it.
We as a board will
That's
approve the next iteration or whatever of the pro forma budget, and then when we approve it, to go to the public website, because it does
Yeah, as
just,
long as it goes, I think it's important to put it back up there. Okay.
Yeah.
it's just confusing now.
Any other questions on that? All right, I'll
Is
call.
there-
Go ahead. Sorry.
Is there anything that we want to post from this evening's handouts to the site at this point?
Well, anything in the agenda packet should be posted
Except
with the exception
for
of
Karen's colorful.
Karen's count.
This.
That one hasn't
But
been.
the
And-
stuff
and
from
the
the
pro forma.
DOE, if you want to
All of
post
it?
that.
DOE,
you
It's
can.
all
the DOE
electronic,
and all
okay.
the others,
And the pro forma budget?
but, no, not this one.
Oh, not
This
that
is the
one?
one we're talking about removing
Right.
Until we,
because
Yeah, okay.
we didn't discuss this before it got posted.
That's a public document now.
Right, and I'm just
Oh, that's
asking
true.
that it be removed. I mean, obviously, people could have downloaded copies.
So that's my issue, is it's public, people already have a copy of it out there.
Yeah, I think that kind of creates
I
controversy.
don't know if we want to take it down
Perhaps we shouldn't, and we should just update it with a revised.
or
Otherwise,
draft.
I was just
Just
gonna
have
say,
it
can we
say
put draft
draft.
across it or something? Just,
That's what pro forma is, really.
I don't, but people might not understand if it says draft, something, but I would not be in favor of taking a document down that's already been up there for,
Well. Is there,
Draft.
Kathy, is there any,
This is
is there
draft
any,
okay, as long as
It
it
says
says.
draft on it.
It does say-
of use of overuse of the word draft, but it appears.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
pro forma draft.
Yeah, as
It's a
long as
double
it says draft, it can't
Okay,
be used,
yeah.
I'm fine with it staying where it is.
And you'll need to
Alright.
make your vote.
okay, there's a motion on the floor and there's a second. So all in favor of removing the pro forma draft budget from the public website? Raise your hand. 2 in favor,
Oh, the
against?
second one? I'm sorry.
Me and Karen,
Kim and Karen.
against? 5. 2, 4, 5 against.
2, 4,
Okay.
5.
2, 4, 5 against. Okay. All right. Is everybody in agreement, though, with adjusting on this pro forma budget, these losses of income to reflect what the actual loss to Timberlane would be? Is that okay, Jeff?
But if you've had the discussion, that was the purpose, so thank you.
Okay.
Thank
you. Okay, anything else before we adjourn? So we'll see you.
But should we start trying to look at our schedules and figure out what the actual dates are going to be for the remaining meetings?
Well, yeah, why not, I mean, we've got
Meetings through
We've got meeting through the middle of June, so why don't we, if we're deciding to move forward, plan to have your calendar so that we can have schedule the rest of the meetings.
Okay.
Because we'd have to have this done by the middle of July in order to get it, we've got to post it for the public hearing. And that would have to be done according July 22nd. I know I'm leaning over, I don't know where it is in my packet, so.
I hear you. I've had the same problem.
All right, so we will plan to make a decision as to whether or not we're moving forward at the next meeting after people have had a chance to review. If you have more to put into the pros and cons, you know, what you were talking about, let's start to populate that document more, because I think that's really what you want to look at when you get ready to move forward. So, thank you very much, everybody, and we'll adjourn at 9:46.